All right, everybody. I think we're going to get ready to turn Skip loose here. I wanted to let everybody know I think the 50-50 is right around $3,000 right now, and there still are tickets left. There also still is food left. If anybody wants seconds, go ahead and get that now. Otherwise, we're going to settle in and let Skip kind of do his thing. But just a little introduction. Obviously, most of you guys know he's from Iowa. And he does a lot of he tries to protect the regulations out there, keeping baiting out, keeping crossbows out, keeping non-residents limited, and just keeping the regulations as tight as possible. So we really appreciate him coming all this way out here to speak for us. So I'll turn it over to you, Skip.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, I think about 350 days out of the year, my public speaking is to trees, tractors, a few critters around the farm, and pretty mellow at the farm. So glad to be here. And one thing that drives me nuts growing up, I'd have to go to meetings and get bored out of my mind listening to people talk. So if I see anybody dozing off, I'll probably go on some random tangent and catch your attention. You know what I mean if I notice it. But thanks for having me. I'll give you a little, here's my bullet points, and I'll work off that. And at any point, if people have questions, and at the end we can go through some questions too. I want it to be spontaneous and cover any issue somebody can think of. Little history about myself. Grew up in Michigan. Non-hunting family, lived in town, and I always was kind of like the nature boy, wanting to go out of town. And my parents would drop me off there, and I'd catch frogs and turtles and snakes, and I just loved being out there. And even back then in Michigan, everything was restricted. You couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. Even getting permission, hey, I just want to go hang out at your pond. A lot of times I couldn't even do that. So I'd say from the age I was about 10 years old, I wanted to own land. And I started saving for land at 10 years old because our family was absolutely broke. And I started mowing lawns and bringing $20 at a time to Edward D. Jones so I could save for land at 10 years old. And this was before I even got into hunting, and had no interest in hunting at that point, actually. So I would say my hunting or fishing, rather, would have started out a little bit of fishing. And one thing I noticed in Michigan, I think I noticed things at a very young age that maybe other kids wouldn't pay attention to. Like in Michigan, there'd be a new pond that would be put in, or access to a new pond. And it might be good for about 1 year. And what you would see in Michigan is you'd see everybody go there and say, what's the limit? And everybody would leave with as much as they could take. And you'd say, hey, that pond was good for about 2 weeks, and no one would fish it ever again. And everybody would just take everything. And then I started getting into, somebody's like, hey, you should go squirrel hunting. So I went squirrel hunting, really got into that, and I thought, this is awesome. And it was kind of the same way with that. I mean, everything got shot, and it was just, how much can I take? And then at one point I went to a church camp, and they had an archery set up there, and it was, your $20 shoot at a hay bale type thing, and I thought, this is really cool. So I went home and I spent $20 of my lawn mowing money, and I bought one of those very cheap long bows and shot at hay bales in my backyard. And that was when somebody had said, hey, go out squirrel hunting once. Well, when I went out squirrel hunting, I saw a deer one time. So my buddy said, why don't you try and use a bow and arrow to go hunt for deer? And I thought it sounded like a great idea. So I showed up there, my mom dropped me off, and I got a little cheap compound bow, and I just started walking around. And after about maybe 10 hunts, I had a very successful hunt. I saw a handful of deer running away at about 300 yards. And that was me just about getting a deer. So I'd come home to my buddies and be like, I almost got one. those deer, 300 yards away, it was about 4 of them. They were running. I saw the tails. And I mean, that was just an absolute train wreck disaster. But it finally did work out where one of these photos up here, you'll see it'd be the blue denim, all blue outfit, walking around with a bow and arrow, seeing a deer. And I was telling some guys this earlier. It was on the other side of the field, and it was about to leave the field to go to a whole other place. And I thought, yeah, that deer's about 125 yards, so if I hold my bow about like this, that might do it. And I literally was going to do that. I had no clue what I was doing. The deer ended up turning around and coming around the field, so I just ducked in the cover because I was walking around. And the deer I could see him in the corner of my eye on the fence line, and I shot that deer at like 2 yards off the ground. And after I don't know how many failed hunts, just miserably, complete train wreck hunts, I got this deer at 2 yards. And it was the most amazing experience of my life. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe it actually happened. And it was like this big reward, right? Because I had spent dozens and dozens of hunts trying to do this, and it finally worked out. And some other guy had walked up after I shot it that also had permission there, old guy. And I could tell he was a little bit irritated I got this buck. And I couldn't hunt there anymore. But I got that buck. And it was amazing. And it was little buck. Wonder if it pops up yet. So everywhere I went in Michigan, from then on, it was by permission or it was public land. And you didn't see a deer for a week. That was pretty common. One time when my mom was raising all the boys, single mom household, my brother and I leased a 5-acre tract of land, and I could see my brother across the 5 acres, and that's where we hunted the whole season. So I know what it's like at the absolute bottom, as bad as it can get. And thankfully, I know what it's like, everything in between, going to a dozen different states now and hunting better and better land, and then all of a sudden I'm 21 and I buy a farm, and after I'd saved since I was 10 years old, and then just never stopping since. So I've got to see the worst, and I've gotten to see the best, and I'm thankful for that. I know my story would be very, very different if Dad had some money and Dad had 200 acres that I could just go hunt. I wouldn't be here today. I never would have saved like I did. I never would have bought my own farm. I never would have learned. I had all these experiences at the bottom. So one thing I'd just say to sum that up is I can relate to the kid that has nothing, the kid that goes out and just wants to have a great experience, that says, listen, I love this. I want to have opportunities. I want to have a fun time when I'm out. I don't want to just see dudes ruining everything and, just the resource degraded or having access to nothing. I can relate to those kids. And I can also relate to the guy that's like, dude, listen, I got permission on 10 acres here. I hunt public over there. Maybe I got permission on 80 acres, but there's 10 acres of woods. I understand what that guy's life is like because I lived it for decades. So that's where I'm coming from. And where I really am coming from now is, 30 years later, I would say for about 20 years, I had some really, really good hunting. And guys were like, you want to film your hunts? I'm like, no. Because every time I did, I'd talk about it or people would figure it out. My land would get targeted or I'd get kicked off of farms every time I shot a big deer. So I'm like, I'm just going to keep to myself for 20 years. And finally, I'm like, okay, I have enough land now. And now, I'm getting older. I let other people hunt my farms, take as many people out as I possibly can. And it's like, okay, now it's my time to give back. Now it's my time to serve. Because this doesn't impact me anymore. I'm quote unquote set as far as hunting goes. But it's like, the main person in my mind that I'm thinking of is that 15 to 25-year-old that's saying, someday I'd like to buy some land, but right now I can't. I can't afford a $5,000 lease. It'd be nice if I could chase a mature buck. It'd be nice if I had a managed deer herd to hunt, and everybody wasn't here just take. So that's where I'm coming from. I'll give a very little bit of history here. If you follow this back, if you follow the whole hunting situation back with regulations, the debate on regulations started with Teddy Roosevelt enacting all the bills he did, and basically getting away from unregulated market hunting, okay? So before then, it was do whatever you want. Don't let the government tell you what to do, which I have some of those views. I'm probably in the right wing, extreme right wing of things in a lot of ways, and small government, and don't get involved in my life. But when we had that model, it erased the big game animal off the landscape. And Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, caught this, and he started regulating hunting, and that is when regulation took place. And even the days of hunting is a rich man's sport happened after that, because people would say, back then it was literally 100 years ago plus, it was like, it's all about the fox hunters and the guys that want to shoot, quail and partridge and stuff like that. And that's where the whole debate about a rich man's sport started. And I'm not saying there's not validity to that. I'm not at all. And I'm saying there's solutions, so this isn't a rich man's sport. There's a way around this. But these debates around regulations have gone on for well over 100 years, and they're still going to go on. And it's a good thing. Our regulations are meant to change with problems or with the current situation. We can't stay static with anything, right? And if things are going in the wrong directions, it's our duty to change these regulations to accommodate for the current situation, or to say, listen, if we keep going at a certain trajectory, this is what hunting's going to be like in 15 years. And I can visualize this in my mind, what it's going to be like if we keep on this pace. So I'll get to that in a minute. The good news is this. There's several good points. So one, the good news is that God gives us salvation. It's more important than this hunting. It's more important than any of these things that we're talking about, and it's something we can't overlook. Whether you're on the absolute opposite side of this issue, I still love you, God loves you, you need that salvation, and it's okay that we disagree. So, that is the most important thing in my life, and I hope it's the most important thing in your life. And, I do think God gives us a responsibility to manage the resource correctly, to say, let's leave this better for the kids, because when I'm out hunting, I'm in God's creation, right? I'm not in some concrete jungle in the city. I'm out in God's creation, and that's an experience with God. And I think by getting not allowing these kids the opportunity to hunt, to have these good experiences, you're taking away that opportunity that I think God would want them to have. So the other good news, truthfully, is Ohio actually has some really good regulation stances. And I'm around all over this country, whether it's literally hunting or have hunted, or dealing with the DNR, or dealing with the legislator in probably a dozen states. I have these conversations nonstop. People from all these states talk to me. We have very deep discussions around this. Ohio has some very good things happening. And sometimes when you're like, I got things a little bit rough, I think it's human nature to go, that guy's got it worse off than me. Your neighbors up north in Michigan, they have it really, really bad, really rough. So be appreciative for what you have, because that place up there is an absolute train wreck. It is where I come from. It could not get any worse. It is absolutely, positively the worst managed state in the country, bar none, hands down, no debate. No debate. But I'm from Pennsylvania, and I think it sucks. No. Michigan's far worse. They couldn't do anything to make it any worse. So be appreciative that you have some common sense regulations like 1 buck and a late gun season. Because that without that, I drove around last night for an hour and a half looking at you guys' ags fields in pretty populated areas, and there was bucks with frames, 2, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. Right over there were several over 250 inches, just right over there. 3 miles that way, 250 inch plus. So there were several really nice bucks. Now, when I grew up, not one time in my life did I see a 2.5-year-old out in the field. I didn't drive around in the car and say, there's a 2.5-year-old buck. I've never seen one growing up in Michigan. Not one time. Now, it has gotten better in Michigan because a third of the hunters have quit. And guys have tied up access and said nobody's coming in here. And to the hunters' credit, they said, Michigan DNR, you guys are out of your minds. We're going to form a co-op with other hunters and agree to make our own regulations. That's the only thing that's happened that's good in Michigan. And it's hunters just taking the regulation into their own hands. So you guys have some really good things. And even my own state, which I would argue has the most common sense regulations in the country, period, going through all of them, still has its problems. There's things that I'm like, we need to fix this. We have this problem. But Ohio has a lot of great things going on. And people would say, Iowa is a well-managed state. Is that just for trophy bucks? No, we have a balanced age class, but we also have a extremely balanced buck to doe ratio. We don't have these massive doe overpopulations. 99% of our state is actually, the doe population is too low, and we're actually trying to get it up because the residents have the access to the land, and they probably do a little bit too good of a job controlling the doe numbers. So that's actually a problem in Iowa, where you get to these states where it's degraded or things get so locked up or the non-residents control everything. Then you get these pockets where the DNR is like, why are we got a huge doe problem? Everybody's shooting every buck and nobody's shooting does. Iowa doesn't have that. So we've got a lot of common sense in our state. But it doesn't mean we don't have our problems. So living in Michigan and just being around the Midwest, being in Ohio many, many times, and understanding Ohio, and it is a little bit similar to Kansas, where I've been going for 25 years as well. I look at things in Kansas, and I'm just going to lump Ohio into this as well. 15 to 20 years ago, when I went to Kansas, I didn't see any corn piles. It was legal. It was legal. I didn't see any, though. I never walked across and said, oh, that guy has a corn pile. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years after hunting there, I finally saw a corn pile. Fast forward to today. They are littered across that landscape to an obscene degree in 15 years. I mean, blink your eyes, and that place is like if you flew over it, it'd be speckled gold everywhere. I mean, distasteful. And I'm like, I cannot believe how much it has changed in 15 years. It's tough for me to see something change that quickly. And, the other thing that's changed in Kansas, and I'm going to imagine, I'm just going to guess here, most of you guys would say, who are maybe a little bit older that have been around, say for that 15-year period or 20-year period, I'm just going to guess. You tell me if I'm wrong. You can chime in now, you can chime in later on. But my guess would be you'd say, 20 years ago, there was some corn piles, but today, oh my gosh, what the heck? It is totally different than 20 years ago. Something's changed at a very fast pace, at a massive trajectory. And the trajectory of what's going on with you guys, with the corn piles, with the land being locked up, the non-residents come in here and leasing. We're not at a plateau. We're not at a flat place. It's an upward trajectory. So my point is if it's changed this much in 15 years, what's it going to look like 15 years from now? Because this trajectory, it's not slowing. And I can tell you how this story ends. It'll end with continued corn piles, continued problems. You'll never get control of your doe populations. And it'll look like a lot of other states have seen, where it's all controlled by non-residents. It's all leased up. It's all controlled by, leasing. You can't get permission. And when that happens, the kids that at the beginning, I said, I'm thinking about in the back of my head, me at 15 to 25, that's like, dude, I can't afford $500 or $5,000 to lease a piece of land. All those people will get pushed out. And some people would say, well, I'm glad. I want there to be less hunters. And I will respond somewhat controversially to that. I want less hunters that just want to be there to take. It's just about me. I don't care about the resource. And I don't mind if somebody says, I like to take to fill my freezer. I like to take for this experience. But if none of their view on hunting is about the resource, about their neighbor, about the next generation, I have a real problem with that. If their only focus is themselves. And I would say if we lose some of those hunters, it probably wouldn't be a bad thing. The hunters I don't want to lose, those hunters, that exact group that I would like to see less of is going to force out, is going to be these kids. They will force them out because they will have absolutely no place to go. The state of Ohio will sit here and go, we are overrun with does. The residents don't have anywhere to go. This land sits vacant the whole year for 1 week for a guy to show up to shoot a buck, and he's not shooting a doe. How do we even get in control of this? And it's a downward spiral. And it's an out of control system that cannot be, it will not be sustained. So, that's just a concerning thing for me to say. Look at what has changed in 15 years and really think what's it going to be in another 15 years if we don't fix these things. But that's the key. We, the people, the voters, the citizens of this state, which you guys are, I'm a guest, I'm a non-resident guest of this state if I were to ever hunt here, it's your resource. Remember, the deer are a state-owned shared resource. Somebody could say, don't tell me what I can do on my own land. I'm not. But when it comes to the wildlife and to the management, you can't do whatever you want. There's a reason that waterfowl is federally regulated. I mean, we share that across the whole country. Well, deer, we share those with our neighbors. Those, we don't own those. So if you want to dig your own pond and take every fish out of your own pond, that's one thing. But that's not a shared resource. Deer are. The state owns it. The citizens own it, where you should have a voice to say what is best for that resource and what's best for the future of how we manage that resource. So a lot of people privately probably say to me, but dude, if I can't bait, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Well, there probably will be some people that have a year, maybe two, of having to learn what the people in Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan actually, and several other Midwestern states have to do is this is a deer trail, this is a funnel, this is a bottleneck, this is a scrape line. You can make a water hole, you can make a rub post, you can make mock scrapes. Doesn't hurt a thing. There's no downsides to all those things. You can put in a food plot if you want. And listen, I spent 15 years not hunting food plots. I went into woodlots in Michigan, which look very much like here, identical. And there wasn't any deer, so you guys have a slight leg up on me there. But we still managed to get it done in areas with hardly any deer. So with 4.5 months of season, guns, crossbows, muzzleloaders, and compound bows, if you can't get it done in 4.5 months, there's other hobbies, possibly two, but it's very doable. So yeah, there might be the occasional guy that's like, oh, I have to actually put in a little effort how to hunt deer like everybody else in the country does that doesn't have bait, which is a huge portion. And the success rate of people in Iowa, Ohio, or Indiana, Illinois, it's very high. We do very well. If I wanted to go on, and I hunt average parcels, I have a piece with 10 acres of timber on it that I farm. 10 acres of timber. If I wanted to go out there and shoot a buck, it would take me one night. One night. There's no bait piles there. I mean, it's illegal, but I really don't know anybody that even cheats the system and throws out bait. People do just fine. In one night, if I said, I need to fill my freezer, on a good cold October evening, I could probably go shoot 5 does in one night. But I only have 4.5 months to get it done. Okay, not enough. We could talk about do we need to make it year-round hunting? It's ample. So, people will say things like, I need the bait to hunt. There is alternatives, and there's alternatives without the downsides, and I'll get into that really, really quickly in just a second. But, if somebody said, well, you dug a water hole, and the deer come to that water, that's fine. There's no downsides to a water hole. There is some major downsides to bait, which I'll get into. So it's not like there's not alternatives. And hunting without bait and hunting without food plots can be shown over and over and over. It is very, very possible to get this done. One thing I don't want to leave out, and I literally have my list of bullet points, so I at least want to cover those, and then we can go wherever you want to. But any change, we've tried to get some things done in Iowa, and we have got them done, where it's like, that's an 80% issue. That's a 90% issue. When it's a 90% issue, that means there's 10% opposed to it, right? There's always backlash, especially on like maybe you guys don't do this because I try and stay off it, but like the Facebook comments or like social media comments where like the nut jobs come out of the woodwork that live in mom and dad's basement. And they post everything just crazy. So that 10% is going to be loud, okay? It's not like you're going to say, listen, we have the facts on our side. This is what's best for the resource. This is definitively what we need to do. And expect that nobody's going to, that a group isn't going to go out there and have a tantrum. They're going to have a tantrum on any issue. You can see this play out in the last 6 months on DOGE trying to make any cuts to the government. I don't care how obscene the spending was. They would say this, and a group in D.C. would lose their minds. You're going to take away Sesame Street in Iraq, the funding for that? Gender studies in the Middle East, you're going to take that away? They'd protest. I mean, these people, there will be protests for anything. You want to remove illegal immigrants from this country? We're going to fight, we're going to protest, we're going to make it, cause chaos. So whatever it is, any regulations. I remember when Indiana went from $2 to $1. It was the right thing to do. And the vast majority of those hunters afterwards said, thank you. I'm glad we did it. I disagreed before, but now that you did it, I don't want to go back. But there was a huge backlash to that. And they said, no, this is a smart thing to do. And Indiana went to $1, and the hunters went, even the ones that disagreed, the majority went, right on. But there's backlash to anything, so just be prepared for it. This is just how the world works. It's how politics work. You guys understand this stuff, but I still have to say it because there is a lot in society that are like, well, I want to fight for this, and the second they get a little resistance, the second they have somebody that throws a tantrum, they tend to put the brakes on or try and be politically correct, and, well, I don't really want to have a stance on this, even though I do believe that this is absolute madness, but I'm a politician, so I just won't have a stance on it, or I'll ignore it, or I'll spin. You can have some stances on these issues. You have the truth on your side, you have the facts on your side. And I'll just tell you real quick, why Iowa works, and states like Iowa work. You go to Iowa, and our DNR has a great relationship with your state, with multiple states, and even the legislators, and we have just countless amounts of current robust data on like hunter retention. You go to Iowa, which is a non-bait state, and we limit that state to 6,000 non-residents a year. Our hunter retention for kids is through the roof. And there's other examples like Indiana, a few others, where when you compare, Iowa uniquely is probably one of the better ones. But you look at the hunter retention for the kids and how many of them stay in the sport compared to the bait states, we absolutely pummel the bait states. And somebody would be like, wait. So kids go out in Iowa, get that experience, and they stay hunting, but the kids in the bait states don't, by a large margin, and the data supports this. Yes. And I will anecdotally answer that question as to why. When I grew up in Michigan, you could use bait. I didn't see it done a ton, but I would go to some of my buddies that their parents had some money, and they would dump truckloads of sugar beets, corn piles, apple piles, and my buddies would bring me out there, and they'd go out there, and a deer would walk up, they'd shoot it with a rifle, and they'd be done the first day. Every single one of those kids I can remember in my mind that were my friends that grew up that way are not hunters today. Because and I've heard them explain it to me, and it's anecdotal, but I've heard them explain it to me. It wasn't hard. It wasn't challenging. It's kind of lame. And I see the kids nowadays, when I talk to them when they are around that situation, they say, it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that fun. They didn't have that, what I explained earlier, like that, 3-4 weeks, a month, the whole season of walking around goofing it up, not getting a deer, where when you finally got it, you're like, holy cow, it came together. I'm so excited. I mean, they don't get to do that. It's the first time out, instant gratification, it's easy. And how many kids have used this word to me? It was just lame. It's just lame. I'd just rather, so what are you going to do? I'll just play on my iPad. Let's play video games. I'll do something else. That's what's happening with these kids. And the other thing that's happening with these kids is the access gets so tied up that they're like, dude, I don't have anywhere to go. The places I can go are so overrun, and nobody gives me permission. I can't afford $5,000 for a lease. I can't afford $500 to throw corn piles out. So when I do go out, it stinks. So, like some of the guys were saying in Ohio, you can't use bait on public land. I think that would be accurate, correct? Okay. So you can't use bait on public land. So people say, it's a rich man's sport and so on. Well, it's not the rich man hunting the public land. But what their view would be is, the guys down the road from the public land can use bait. So when I go to the public land, I don't see anything because they pulled all the deer off. The rich guys did. So what I'm saying is, if you don't have bait, the person that's going to be helped the most is the everyday guy. The guy that's like, I am hunting on public land. Hey, they don't have bait anymore, and I can actually go to public land because I don't have money. I'm a kid. I just want a decent quality experience, and there's actually deer here now because the wealthy guy down the road isn't throwing out a corn pile and sucking every deer off the public land. So that's who benefits the most, is the everyday guy, the working man. And when you create a better age structure across the whole state, and everybody isn't gunning down every buck over a corn pile and passing every doe and locking up every bit of land, the kids and the everyday man are the ones that benefit. And that's what I care the most about. And I can't make this clear enough. I have nothing against the wealthy man. I have nothing against the guy that owns a ton of land or that's set or has acquired all these things. But they're always going to be just fine. I'm not worried about them because they'll always be set. Okay? You can put any regulation in place you want. Those guys are going to go, I'll figure it out. I'll buy more. I'll lock more land up. I'll lease more land up. I'll put a bigger corn pile out than you. They always will have it figured out. The ones who don't have it figured out are the kids that are saying, I can't do all these things, and I'd love to get into hunting, and because of all this madness, I'm not. And we know how this ends when the kids are quit and the next generation isn't here. That system does not end well. So it's our duty to fix this for the next generation of kids. So real quickly, I'll just go over the pros and cons debate, because I do think there's some merits. There's some merits to anything, and I'm a very open-minded, critical thinker. I can even say, "Hey, liberal friend, explain your point of view to me," and I'll listen. And at the end, I'll say you're crazy, but I appreciate your view. Not really. I'm actually fairly open-minded, but there's merits to debate. So I throw out a corn pile, not just for no reason. They do it for a reason. I think that I will see more deer with corn. I think it makes hunting easier. I think I'm busy. I don't have time to scout and figure all these other things out. I don't have time to put in a food plot. So I throw out bait, and I don't have to do all these things. It makes it easy. And I have a perception that I'll see more deer with bait. That's about the main merit. The other merit is this, I have a business, and I sell bait to hunters. So that's my livelihood. Those are the merits in my mind. If I'm missing something, please chime in, bring it up in a little bit, whatever. But that's about what I see the merits of bait. Now, we have to weigh all these things out, and I do the same thing for food plots. Food plots are, somebody say, food plots have the same goal. Okay, fair enough. It's to bring deer in, right? Okay, but now let's look at the negatives, and tell me what the negatives of food plots are, or a 100-acre cornfield or a 50-acre soybean field. Follow me with the negatives. Some of the negatives with corn piles. One, people put out corn piles, gets a whole bunch of moisture in it, gets something called aflatoxins in it. It's fungal. It kills deer, it kills turkeys. This is fact. You can Google aflatoxins on your phone. Aflatoxins, comma, corn pile. Read about it. It kills wildlife. It does. I look at the bait states like Kansas or Ohio or any of the ones that I see that my buddy sent me, and it's like, dude, he's like, hey, look at this buck right here. And I look at it and I say, dude, I'm like that buck, but dude, there's like 75 raccoons in this photo. Oh, yeah, we don't do anything about that. I get a feeder so the coons can't get in. That's the best they do. And then they go, oh yeah, Kansas especially, we don't have any turkeys anymore. They're gone. Wiped out. Well, should the turkey hunters have a voice here? Because they're getting decimated when these guys, and they're like, I don't want to trap raccoons. I just throw a bait. It just creates a culture of laziness. So that's one big negative to bait too, the raccoons and stuff like that. Now, another thing that happens is the browse and the habitat around those bait sites gets absolutely destroyed. I mean, it's absolutely pummeled. So, being in an Amish community with, being, and this is a stretch, but it's a very real thing. Hey, our livelihood is lumber. Our livelihood is good quality timber and sustainable timber practices into the future. You start putting corn piles out, your oak regeneration is absolutely wiped out. It will be junk, softwood trees that come up. It absolutely destroys the oak ecosystem and the natural browse for the deer. The next negative that bait has is right when season gets done and it gets the coldest, I'm done. I can't shoot a deer over that bait, so the bait goes. It's crazy. Where in Iowa, it's the exact opposite. Right when season gets done is when we can supplemental feed, and guys do, where the deer need it the most. But a lot of these areas, the deer have been so unnaturally congregated into these areas, all the browse is wiped out, so you pull that bait, and deer can starve and have all sorts of other problems. At best, they're going to leave that season in far less health, in a less ideal state, while they destroy the habitat. The predation around bait sites is astronomical. So, I hear this comment ad nauseum. So what you're saying is cornfields and soybean fields are good, but a corn pile is bad. Yeah, I'm saying that. I am. Cornfields and soybean fields, and even, those are natural parts of our production to feed the world. And we're not going to change that. That's a farming culture that goes back for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, a 1-acre cornfield, which if I tried to have that, would get absolutely decimated, but that would be 43,000 square feet. A corn pile is 10 square feet. 10. It is 4,300 times larger, a 1-acre cornfield. And to have things like diversity, like, hey, I have clovers. Okay, the clovers are feeding those deer year-round. It regrows. It's sustaining, bees. The chicks of turkey poults can forage in there. We have pheasants. Big benefit to pheasants, quail. It improves the soil. Running these cover crops and these diverse things. And here's one thing: my job essentially is fixing up farms, improving habitat. I absolutely love it. And I leave these farms far better off than what I found them, so the next generation can have a sustainable, regenerated farm that's like, wow, all these issues that were just degraded, trampled in cattle areas and ponds and erosion and forest that was mismanaged and it was all garbage. I fix all those things. And when I go to Kansas and I talk to my friends that are passionate hunters, and I ask them about all these things, almost unanimously, like 9-1, nobody does them. And it's perplexing to me because I'm like, most of my friends do at least something in Iowa. I'm trying to promote more oak regeneration. I'm trying to stop the erosion. I'm trying to manage my timber so there's more forage in it and release some of these oak trees and, get rid of some of the invasives. In Kansas, they do none of that. I'm not saying literally it doesn't exist, but 9-1, it doesn't exist because they all say the same thing. Why would I do that? I can just throw out a corn pile. So the environment suffers because of it. The whole ecosystem suffers from it. The whole habitat system suffers because of it. And if you don't have the corn pile, some of these guys are going to go, maybe I need to get a little bit motivated here and actually put in a food plot. Maybe I need to go manage my timber. Maybe I need to do some things that create more natural browse and do all these other activities instead of just taking my time to dump out corn. It will motivate people because they're going to go, maybe these are some things that'll help me out. And that's what goes on across the state of Iowa and these non-bait states. I mean, even Illinois, the habitat work, as many problems as Illinois has, the habitat work there is phenomenal because they can't bait. So I would say you look at the sustainability of their timber and their ecosystem, it's far more robust than the bait states. So, the detriments of food plots, they don't have things in the food plots that create a fungal issue that kill animals, okay? They benefit all sorts of wildlife. They benefit the health of the deer. They grow year-round if you plant the proper things. It's not like right when hunting seasons end, your food plot is ending. No, if you've got stuff like rye or even grains that you're left up, those can go into the spring, keeping a healthy deer herd, which is what we do in Iowa. And these deer end up being extremely healthy. Sometimes they grow nice. There's my Michigan deer. There's the Iowa deer. So I would say we have a fairly nutritious system that results in a healthy, well-managed deer herd. And if somebody ever were to say you're just a trophy hunter or something, and people like to throw that term out like a derogatory attack, it's like, well, how do you define trophy hunter? Because in my mind, I could define the trophy hunter as the guy who throws out a corn pile and waits for the best genetic 2 or 3-year-old to show up and shoots them and says, look what I got. Look at this 2 or 3-year-old I got, and he puts it all over Facebook. In my mind, I could call that a trophy hunter, right? I'm not saying I haven't shot a year-old, a 2-year-old, or a 3-year-old. I'm not saying I haven't done that, but when that's what these guys want to use is you're a trophy hunter, but they're the same guys that will shoot the best genetic young, stupid deer with kickers and flyers with the best genetics so he could brag to his friends. I could argue that's a trophy hunter. Now, if you want to call me a trophy hunter because I want to have some deer get to maturity, and I'm passing those 2, 3, sometimes 4-year-olds, whatever, with kickers and flyers that are trophies to those same people who are calling me a trophy hunter, I'm passing those deer up. And I want to see a balanced older age structure throughout the herd, which biology, science, facts, the DNR cannot deny is the ideal model, and it's what they want. You don't want it where every one of your young bucks and 2 and 3-year-olds gets gunned down every year and you're left with a pile of does. There's no sound biology to that. So if saying there is a few mature bucks around for everybody to hunt, the everyday man, the kid to have a chance, it's not like every deer needs to be this giant. Everybody needs to shoot a mature buck. Not at all, but just a few are around. If that makes me a trophy hunter, then I'm a trophy hunter. But I'm just saying that's just responsible biology, and it's responsible to the benefits to the neighbors, to the other hunters around me that, I passed that buck up. If you shoot it, congratulations. Maybe somebody else shoots it the next year, because this sport isn't just about me. So, I think that's my bullet point. So we can open it up to whatever, and questions, comments, you can throw things at me. We can keep this interesting. If somebody has objections, hey man, I disagree on this, all good, I totally get it, and I love to hear that too. So, Kevin, what are we thinking? You wanna, as hunters debate this thing, I think the most important question and mind shift of people I would just advocate for is not how does this just impact me? What are you going to take away from me, or what is this going to do for me? The question needs to be reverted back to what's best for the resource. What's best for hunters, and what's best for the future. If it's only about, but you can't take this away because I like this, because it's about me, and I've given things up even in Iowa or in different parts of my life where I'm like, maybe I did enjoy something, but somebody made the case to me that if I give this up, it's for the betterment of society. It's the betterment of other people and other hunters. That's how we have to view this. It's not, well, what about me? What about my one need here? It's what's best for the resource. And that's how these questions need to be framed when we're debating it in the public sphere.
I don't know if you guys got that, but basically I was just saying if we elevate the resource first and foremost, we will benefit from that in every way. If we put the resource before our own desires right now and what we want, we're going to benefit. But if we want to go into questions, if you guys have questions written down on postcards, you guys can pass those all the way to the right. We'll pick them up, and I'll bring this mic down. Anybody raise your hand if you guys have a question for Skip. I'll come down and hand you the mic. Jared, if you want to come up, if anybody has questions for you, and we'll just roll with it.
The hot topic around here is the EHD outbreak.
Yep.
Should Ohio try to do a pivot this year and limit out-of-state hunters? So my ground is across the street from a very large public land lease. And third week of October all the way through November, there's not an Ohio plate over there. If it's designated as bad as they're saying or what everything that I see online, if they don't pivot and they still allow the out-of-state pressure, I just feel like if they still allow that, is this the year that we can kind of get ahead of the out-of-state non-resident hunters to just kind of put a baseline down moving forward?
I think there's a huge amount of gains you can have with the non-residents. Where the non-resident hunting really started is when we had a ample resource that was not being, overutilized and overtaken. So, but when that pendulum swings to the other side, where you say, hey, the residents don't have places to go, their quality of hunting has gone down. In Iowa, we're not going to change this, but we limit it to 6,000 non-residents a year. And there's probably most people in the legislature in DNR that would say, because we have 7% timber in Iowa, we have such little habitat, and we have access issues. It's not nearly as bad as Missouri, Illinois, and some of the more degraded states because we limit the non-residents. But a lot of mindset, and I'm not saying we're going to change it, but there's a pretty prevalent mindset like, listen, if the residents don't have access to hunting land and a good quality experience, why are we letting any non-residents in? And I know that would be like, woo, he said, I can't believe he just said that, or people think that, but, and I'm not necessarily saying that, I'm not anti-non-resident at all, and I go to states as a non-resident. Kansas welcomes me as a non-resident, but I would advocate to not make it harder for me, guys. When your residents have nowhere to go, here's the deal. For me to travel to Kansas to shoot a buck is a luxury, and it is shooting an animal that belongs to your state, the citizens of your state, not me. It's a luxury for me to travel there. On the flip side of that, it is a necessity for the residents to be able to hunt there, because they're the ones shooting the does. They're the ones that are actually doing it to fill their freezer. I mean, if I wanted to say with a straight face that I drive 6 hours into Kansas to go fill my freezer, and that's the main reason I'm doing it, come on. Then I'd shoot a doe for sure, which I'm not. I'm shooting a buck. So it's a luxury. It is. And there's nothing wrong. I don't have a problem with that, really. It's just that, if there's these luxury categories of people that can come to these states just to hunt a buck and take a spot up on a state-owned land that's owned by you guys, that's supposed to be your resource for your recreation, and people from other states are utilizing that, there needs to be some limitations in place. Otherwise, there's going to be nothing left. And the residents are like, listen, because of all the leasing, the outfitting, and all this, I'm priced out. At least I have the public land to fall back on. Wait, I don't. It's ruined. It's crowded. That's a real problem. It almost, in a sense, is prioritizing the non-resident over the resident. I mean, and we see that in society a lot. Like, wait, you're giving more to me, and it's a stretch. It's getting a little off tangent here, but to me, it's like the people saying, hey, you guys are kind of prioritizing the illegal immigrant more than the American citizen at this point. It's kind of, I'm not equivalizing those two at all, but there's a little bit of echo there. And the states in any state need to prioritize to a substantial level the residents. And if a state gets to a point that they're like, listen, we have lots of deer, we have lots of access, and we have lots of extra ample supply of that resource, a scarce, limited resource, and the residents aren't taking that resource and there's extra, great, open it up to non-residents. But if it's the other way around, like, no, the access is non-existent, it's getting less and less and less, and the residents don't have access to good quality land, which, by the way, any state, it's either number one or number two reason why hunters are quitting. Lack of access to quality land is number one or number two on every single Midwestern state. So when that is a problem, that in itself says we need to restrict the non-resident access. And the last thing I'd add to the non-residents coming to your state, okay, and this happens in Iowa, it happens in a lot of Midwestern states. Wait. You're coming to Ohio from where? Well, New York, from Michigan, from Wisconsin, from Georgia. Wait. Are there no deer there? Well, no, there's tons of deer. Is there not a lot of habitat there? Oh, no, there's tons of habitat here. Your age class is better, though. Our state is ruined, so I want to come to your state. And that's what every non-resident that shows up in Iowa is leaving a state with more habitat and more deer to hunt the exact same animal. And they drive 10 hours to do it and spend $660 per deer tag to do it. Wait 6 years for that tag to go hunt that exact same animal because of the age class. That's it. It's the exact same animal. So my message to some of those folks, they'll come to Iowa and they'll actually want to change our regulation. No, we want over-the-counter tags in Iowa. They come to Iowa and demand that of us. And I say, pardon me? You're not a citizen of our state. You don't pay taxes here. I mean, maybe a little bit of property tax. You don't pay income taxes here. You don't pay taxes 365 days a year like I do. You don't buy all your bow hunting equipment here like I do, and so on. You don't vote here, okay? So instead of changing my state, which they try and do, go fix your own state. You have more deer and more habitat up there. Well, it's too hard. Oh, so you want to fix my state, the state you don't live in? No. Try again. Go try this in some other states. It'd be like me trying to go out to Montana, and they say, no, you got to go through this draw for these elk tags. And I said, well, I got a lot of money, and I'm going to hire a lobbyist, and I want you to change the laws to accommodate what I want. They should laugh in my face. They really should laugh in my face, and they should say, you don't live here, you don't vote here, and just because you have money, we actually prioritize the voters and the citizens of our state that maybe don't have the opportunities you do, and they should laugh in my face and tell me to get the heck out of there. So, prioritize the residents, period.
Any more questions out there, just raise your hand.
I'm going to tack on, if I can, real quick, to just address your EHD portion of your question there. I think because Skip dealt with this last year, they had kind of some outbreaks in that area, and I distinctly remember him getting on the horn, or maybe it was 2 years ago. You can remind me, and trying to notify the people in his area that, hey, we have these doe tags allocated, whether you're a resident or a non-resident. We need to shoot less deer in these specific areas this year. And I think the state is probably going to do that. You're going to see a response in that southeastern part of the state, whether it's directed at residents or non-residents, I don't know. But I think probably the best thing you can do is try to make your neighbors aware of the situation, before they bust in there the first week of gun season or whatever, and just say, hey guys, here's what's going on, here's what we're seeing, here's what we should, try to do for this year and maybe the next couple of years.
Fantastic question right here. I love this. Did you ever shoot a deer off a bait pile? So great. I actually have not. I have sat with some buddies in high school who, hey, Dad's getting the dump truck load of sugar beets. Dad's getting the dump truck load of corn or apples. Come with me and sit with me. I've sat with them. I have a lot of friends that do it. And I've been around it. I have never shot one off it. I've been around it. Now, I have great buddies that throw bait out. And I also have a lot of buddies that I empathize with that are like, dude, listen, I hate the bait thing. I hate it. but if I don't do it, every deer will get pulled off my farm and shot. So it's a defensive baiting. And I don't blame them for doing it. You know, if you legalize something, unfortunately, the world of hunting, a lot of the everyday hunters look at hunting as a big competition. Well, if it's legal, I guess I better do it, because if I don't do it, I don't want the guy next to me to have the leg up, so I'm going to do it. So that's why the regulations come into effect, why the regulations are so important. So I don't actually fault the guy for throwing out the bait pile because it's legal. I fault the state for not fixing the regulations to address what's causing a massive problem. So again, no problem with the guy throwing out the bait pile. I have a problem with the regulations that allow it to be legal.
I've shot plenty of deer off corn piles. And I think it is important probably for me and guys like us to get across that I don't think it's an ethics question or consideration. You know, I think guys feel judged, you know, for hunting over a corn pile, and I'm like, that's not where I'm coming from personally, at least at all. You know, it's not an ethics thing at all. You know, Skip mentioned a lot of the potential negatives to baiting, and you know, I think it's at scale. There's the dynamic that's caused because of you know, it's the corn pile syndrome. Everybody feels like we have to put these corn piles out, and it's like, because if you're not baiting, you're waiting, and my neighbors are all doing it, and then you pile on everything else, you know, with cell cameras and all these technologies, and it's a compounding effect. And so I want to get across that I have shot deer over corn piles, plenty of them. I've got feeders out there running right now. And so it's not an ethics thing. It's a big picture of what is happening to the dynamic of hunters because of these corn piles that I think we bring these issues up.
And just the last tidbit to that, I believe Iowa has it perfect. We allow supplemental feeding. About 2 weeks before hunting season, you pull it. Right after hunting season, you can start it. But it is not at all about killing the animal. It's not like I'm putting that out so I can shoot that deer. It is 100% about the health of the animal. And because we have such a bad problem with EHD, there's a lot of things you can do with feed, you know, whether it's garlic, sulfur, cobalt, B vitamins, stuff like that, things that allow the deer to deal with inflammation, things that repel the midges that really aid in the EHD. So, you know, there's a big difference to me to say, hey, I'm feeding these deer purely for their health and their benefit, as opposed to just the benefit of me being able to shoot them. There's a big difference to me. And I do think Iowa has it spot on. Okay. Thoughts on earn a buck by filling a doe tag before a buck tag is legal? P.S. Do you think Trump would help us with this? Trump's on board with everything we're doing, by the way. I have proof of this. I probably could get him on the phone or post a little follow-up video later. Well, he will phone in. So he's on our side on this issue. He thinks the bait's silly business, by the way. Earn a buck, you know, I think when Wisconsin tried it, it pretty well flopped, and it was a huge backlash. And they actually, I've seen this, you know, in 30 years, I've seen this pendulum swing. There's too many deer, and then these guys go bananas, which happened in Iowa, where the DNR said, shoot all these deer. And people who had no clue what they were doing said, hey, I got 20 doe tags now, and we can use rifles, and it's into February. It was crazy. It ruined neighborhoods. So Iowa's just an example of, whoa, there was quite a few deer, and now in 15 years, when I use that 15-year analogy here on what's changed in 15 years, I'll tell you one thing that's changed in Iowa in 15 years. We have half as many deer. Our deer population is in half. And you say, half? Okay, well, there might be regions that are down 10%, but you said half. Yeah, it's an average. There's areas where it's like small woodlots. They're down 90, 95%. Like, there's no deer. Where there used to be deer, and these hunters went, what the heck? So it's very delicate. Somebody, you know, and Iowa does it right where they manage on a county basis. Now, we made a huge blunder right there. Huge blunder. The DNR would acknowledge this. Oops, there's too many deer in this sector of the state, the bottom portion. So they gave tags out across the whole state. And these fragile areas with these little woodlots where it was easy to kill the deer, they wiped them out. gone, no deer left, and it still hasn't rebounded. They did that 10 years ago, and there's still no deer there. I mean, when I say no deer, I mean 3. Like, hey, dude, I went out for a week, I didn't see a deer. I see a couple of deer tracks. They quit. A mass amount of hunters in those areas quit. There's no deer left. So I think, one lesson we can learn is from Wisconsin, where that pendulum swung from too many deer to earn a buck to where areas did get wiped out. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, but I still don't think, I think it's not addressing the underlying cause of why people aren't shooting does, in that so much land is getting locked up. And this trajectory of land getting locked up, leased up, outfitted, and they're just there to shoot a buck, and they're not going to shoot a doe because it's going to goof up your hunt, is not getting fixed. And like I said, if you can't control the doe numbers in 4.5 months, there's something else going on. And it's not hey, I can't get it done. I'm not a capable hunter. I don't have the opportunity. If you can't get it done in 4.5 months, there's something else going on. So that does lead to a very valid point. So should we essentially force the hunters to do it? Well, one, it's not a bad idea. I mean, in theory, it's not a bad idea. It's just a very delicate thing that can go the wrong way, in my opinion. And the other thing it doesn't address is it still does not address the issue of all this land that's locked up that you could say, hey guys, you all have to shoot 10 does, but this landowner is going to say, I have 2,000 acres leased up, and I'm not going to shoot one. I'm not going to shoot a darn one, and you can't force me to do it. I'm going to do my own thing. Or if you could say, hey, everybody, you can shoot 20 does. You can if you want it. And that's what Iowa did. And people did it. But most of the landowners with the big parcels are like, wait, you guys legalize it so everybody can shoot 20? It was unlimited. Unlimited tags. You can shoot as many as you want. All the big landowners just said, nope, nobody is allowed on my land. So these pockets where the deer numbers actually needed to be thin, like legitimately, they didn't get thinned. Because they said, no, I'm not doing that crazy stuff. So what happened is all the areas where it's like the average dudes with 80s and 40s and 10s, and those areas got blown to bits, and all the big landowners, which actually had too many deer, nothing changed. It made the problem far worse. So I understand the sentiment. There may be a nuanced way to do this. Something needs to change, though, and as access gets more tightened up and people say, I got a corn pile, I don't want to screw my hunt up because I want to wait for a buck, I'm not shooting that doe, and people aren't doing it the way it is, there's a problem that needs change, and it needs some kind of solution. And ideas like this, the more of these you get, the better, because what's going on now isn't working in a lot of these areas.
I think one thing with Earn a Buck too is a lot of different state leaders and deer program leaders and stuff like that have considered it. They've all thought from a management standpoint that would make sense. That's one way we could address our overpopulation of does. But from a political standpoint, which is the seat that a lot of them sit in, it's wildly unpopular. It's unpopular with residents, non-residents, anybody whose objective is they want to go out and shoot a buck. They have limited time to do it. A lot of us are in that boat. We're like, hey, I want to go out and target the buck we're after. If I see a doe or I need to fill the freezer later, great, I'll do it. But it is wildly unpopular, and so I think that's what keeps it off the table for the most part. They don't want to lose hunter numbers. It's in Ohio here. It is on a decline. That's one big concern that they have. That's the thing with the corn piles. We're not going to get rid of corn piles or do anything that would upset the hunter numbers to lose them faster than we're losing them right now. And the hunter numbers and income too, frankly, to address, kind of your comment earlier about the non-resident thing there. The reality is that in Ohio, 70% of the license bill is footed by non-residents. And so we can say it's not a money thing at the end of the day, but they're not going to do anything that's going to upset 70% of the revenue, at least that directly. So.
This question here is really good. So, are there any negatives to supplemental feeding in the off season, like destroying the area around the feeder? So, what happens in the winter with the corn pile is those deer are basically eating junk food, and they're still trying to get good quality forage. And no matter what, deer are going to consume natural woody browse, forbs, oak regeneration, different forest regeneration as part of that diet. Now, it's definitely, I would say, I cannot with a straight face say that couldn't occur after season, but where the most damage is generally done is, right around that January to February time with corn piles. That's when all the grain is going away, the fields have been cleaned up, and now it is just a corn pile, and it is it's the woody browse that's left. And what happens in bait states is right at that critical time, the corn pile gets pulled, and then they don't have that corn pile to fall back on. Now it literally is just natural browse. That browse has probably been degraded. So now they're degrading it even more to the point where it completely gets destroyed. And the natural browse, and you look at how many people understand natural browse and oak regeneration and what all this stuff looks like. Like, what are all these plants in the woods? What is that? Do they eat that? And it's a very, very small portion of people that understand this. Very small. But it's a huge component of their diet, and I see it all the time where I'm like, I go into forests, I'm like, dude, this is destroyed. I mean, you got a real problem for the future. Your forest is not a good health situation. So could that stuff happen? Absolutely. But what you have versus the corn pile is you still have that supplemental feed. So they might be, eating some of the browse next to it, but you didn't pull the rug from under them where they go, now it's only browse. So you have supplemental feed and the natural browse. And, to say it can't happen at all, I'm not going to say that statement. It probably could. But what happens in states like Iowa, in most cases, and most non-bait states, is like, people put more time into having food plots there, into managing their timber, so there's far more woody browse and far more browse for the deer to consume throughout the winter, so they stay healthy. And it just really isn't a problem if you manage your timber right. So to say there's not a problem at all, I guess I wouldn't say that, but I'd say if you do some timber management with it, and you have some other diverse food plots, it's going to be greatly minimized. And they're definitely, for the absolute health of the animal, a state where you're like, okay, or a situation where you're like, listen, they ate corn until February 1st, corn. Or here's another situation where they had plots, good forest browse, and now they're eating a high quality, some carbohydrates but with some protein, stuff like that, into the spring. In that case, those deer are going to go into the spring, into that next growing season in far better health, far higher body weights. I mean, before I did any timber management on my farm, plots, anything like that, I would say a mature buck probably dressed out maybe 200 pounds-ish. And we take a little quick video and a picture of every buck we shoot now. And I would say, 200, 215 dressed. And I think last year the smallest buck we shot dressed around 245. So, that's not just one thing. That's not just supplemental feed. It's not just plots. It's not just forestry, but it's all those things combined. But there's a very real difference on the body weights from when I got that farm to 10 years later, and even the score of the animals. I talked to the people who hunted my farm for years, and guys who've leased it or guys who've owned it. I mean, there's different groups I can trace back and talk to them like, we did shoot a 180s one time. And one guy's like, yeah, there was a 190s out there. And then, they're like, wait a minute. You shot a 241, a 233, a 213, a 217. Dude, there was 20 years there was never a 200-inch buck there. So if you do all these things right with proper forestry management, with proper habitat, with some supplemental feeding, with proper nutrients, proper fertility, all these things, it's a huge difference on the health of the animals. Does included, fawns included, bucks included. They're just healthier. They grow bigger. And, one component, it's not the only component, but it's a component we all like. Absolutely they grow bigger antlers. There's no doubt in my mind. Those deer did not exist before I had that farm. Nothing like that. I mean, I think 180-something was the biggest in 20 years we can trace back. And I think the previous owner was kind of like, what the heck? I didn't shoot anything like that. He's perplexed to this day a little bit. So.
Yeah, just to complement what Skip's saying there, I think that question speaks to the importance of balancing food sources on your farm there. Worst case scenario, you go in, during the late season, the gun season, and you dump a corn pile and you have your hunt over it. And then, right as the hardest time of the year for the deer is coming, we're done hunting, so we pull out, we don't dump any more corn, and they're there unnaturally. They're being pulled to a food source that has attracted them there. And if you don't have anything else, food plots or well-managed timber, like Skip is saying, then it could be a problem. At the very least, they're going to leave. Worst case scenario, they have a tough time, making it through winter.
This is a really good one. And this one is purely like, I think if we pass this around, everybody would have a different opinion. And when I say like, hey, here's the negatives on bait, or here's this issue, and I can concretely state my belief with facts, this isn't one of these questions. This is more like everybody's going to have a different view here. Are we losing deer camp culture, and is it important to the future of deer hunting? So Jared's going to have a different answer than I will. You guys would probably all have a different answer. And it's like, I see the different generations and what they see as, a successful deer camp, as enjoyable as their goals. My parents didn't hunt, okay? But folks their age would go out and they'd have deer camp, and success to them was everybody shot a buck, and they had this buck pull, and they would all shoot 1.5-year-old bucks, and that was success, and that was their culture. Now, when I was exposed to those types of people, when I got to meet them and be around them, and my buddies would bring me to their deer camp, I'd meet these older kind of crotchety guys that I just got to get my buck. And I'd see them shoot the 1.5-year-old bucks, and they wouldn't be excited. They cut the horn, they cut the rack off, nail it on the barn door, and I'm like, and this was me coming off that experience where I shot that deer at 2 yards, where I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever, and I'm so excited, like out of my mind, like, whoa, this is I'm hooked for life on this sport, right? And then I see these people, I'm like, wait, you're not excited about that? No, just gotta get my buck. So to them, that's a great deer culture, Fill the buck pull. Yep, we had a successful year. Billy Bob shot his deer, a little spiker. He didn't care. See all them? We nail them up and they rot. They're not excited. They weren't excited to do it in most cases. Now, if somebody said, so am I judging somebody shooting 1.5-year-old buck? Not at all. I'm just saying I just got done shooting 1.5-year-old buck and I was thrilled, but they weren't. And like, yep, this is my 56-1.5-year-old buck. And I used my wife's tag on this one so I could get my third buck. Why? They had all the tricks, and I'm like, but you don't even enjoy that. And it was perplexing. Like, what's the point here? I just didn't get it. But that was success for them. So, are we losing that culture? Well, my generation would probably be like, yeah, please, let's lose that culture. And they'd be like, no, that's a great tradition we had. And then I will say, I do feel like the younger generation just has a little bit more of a, stereotypically on average, just has a little bit more of a conservation-minded mindset to them, It's not, having camaraderie with their buddies, taking a trip out west, having deer camp is still, I still see youth wanting to do that, but I just see them having a bigger emphasis on conservation, and maybe the opposite of what I saw with these old stubborn guys that are, this is long ago, so they're not even hunting now. Probably a lot of them aren't with us anymore, and it's like, I have a lot of respect for the younger generation and their views on conservation that I think some of the old school people that would be my parents' age really didn't have. And I really do respect that. So, and the culture that I see that I want to make sure that these youth don't miss is this culture of, dude, this would be the equivalent of those old timers that would shoot the 1.5-year-old bucks up and they didn't care. And they'd nail the buck up on the barn door and it'd rot, and I never think another thing about it. Well, the youth do have an equivalent of that, and that's like, dude, I just hunt because I want to post something on Facebook and Instagram and social media. That's why, and I want to text it to my friends. That's the equivalent for me of that, and that's the problem I have with the younger generation. So every generation has things you're like, that's good, bad, you know. So it's always a mixed bag. And I would just, you know, really advocate to that next generation, don't hunt for those reasons. Don't hunt because you look at that deer and you're like, oh, if that deer comes close enough, I'm going to be able to get him and then post him on Facebook and Instagram. Because you won't stay with hunting if that's why you do it. Because you're going to have this pressure to get a buck, and if you don't, you're a failure. And then you're going to go shoot something that you're like, I really didn't even want to shoot it, but I had to post something to hunt, or to shoot something so I could post it. You won't stay hunter, and that's not what we want for those kids. So the kids that grasp that have that conservation bone, I really do respect it. And I think this generation we're in now, compared to, you know, maybe the 25 years ago generation of hunters, I do think they have a far better grasp on some of the things. And, you know, not to knock them, but just to call a spade, that older generation let a lot of crap get through in hunting, where they didn't stand up on all this madness that got pushed through, all the make it easy, this weapon, that weapon, tags on for everything, shoot them all year, just make it year-round hunting with rifles. I mean, just anything went, and they didn't do anything about it, and that bugs me. And it's like, now it's our time. It's our time for our generation to catch it. You know, it's to say, no. We're going to catch some of this stuff because we're not going to let all this stuff slide and let the next generation just have the trash, this degraded mess, and this mismanaged wildlife system. You know, so that's why I do really respect the generation and the kids coming up here.
I think the deer camp culture, I mean, definitely has changed. I mean, objectively, you can look at it and, you know, some of you guys are a lot older than I have and experienced, you know, just being in deer camp, you have an idea of what it was. We all got together a certain week. And I know in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, everybody used to head north to the big woods. And like Skip was saying, it wasn't necessarily about the size of the deer. There weren't that many big ones up there. It was just, can we all fill our tags? And I think from a positive standpoint, that's changed a lot. There is a conservation mindset that guys are looking for an older age class of bucks, or, you know, maybe they've put in some time working on the property throughout the season, and they're there to, you know, collect on those efforts. But at the same time, I think that social media and just the pace of life and things have changed a lot since then, and so that'd be a negative stance on it. And so we find ourselves, I think, every year trying to find ways to connect with guys who are passionate about it the same way that we are, and who, you know, are going to appreciate it when you kill a deer. And those are the kind of people that we're trying to surround ourselves with. And so I don't think that the deer camp culture is dead by any means. I would say Skip is a part of my deer camp culture from 12-hour drive away. You know, he'll be one of my first calls, as will Kevin and several of these other guys. And so it definitely looks a little different than it did, you know, 15, 20 years ago. But with some intention and surrounding yourself with the right people, you definitely can still make it happen.
This one may be a little bit obvious here, how I might answer this, but oh wait, shoot. Oh darn. I read the into it. What's the one regulation that would have the biggest positive impact on age class if it were removed or restricted? I didn't read the first sentence that says, aside from baiting. Darn it, I'm like, oh, this is a layup. Baiting. All right, I'll pretend I didn't read that part. Baiting, period, end of story, the corn piles. No doubt about it. Next. If you guys got rid of baiting, the weight off your shoulders, the increase in quality across this whole state for everybody, especially the everyday guy, especially the kids, would be uplifted so greatly. But I'm gonna go for a twofer on this one, and this might not be a popular answer either, but I'm just gonna give my opinion here. If you did what we did and you took the crossbows and put them in their own season, so we take crossbows. You want to use crossbows? Great. Fantastic. I got nothing against crossbows. Yep, we have a muzzleloader season that's 3 weeks long at the end of the year. Put them right there. You want to use a crossbow? No problem at all. And guess what? During archery season, you have an injury, you have a doctor's note, you're disabled, or you're a senior citizen, you can use crossbows during archery season. The dude like me that's using a crossbow, like, listen guys, we have one difficult season left. One. If you want it easy, we have guns. We have smokeless muzzleloaders now that shoot 400 yards. If you want it easy, we have plenty of those seasons. Give us one season that's still hard without ruining it, and that's what we still have in Iowa, and they're not going to get it through. These crossbow lobbyists, that's the only reason crossbows have gotten passed in 90% of the state. It wasn't the hunters. The hunters didn't say, we want crossbows during archery season. It was the crossbow lobbyists, period. They bought your state. They bought Missouri. They bought Minnesota. They bought Illinois. It wasn't the hunters. You guys didn't decide this. Now, well, it's here. It's legal, so I might as well use it. I understand that. I totally get it. But if it could get put in its own season, well, but crossbows are more accurate, so you wound less deer. Okay, rifles are more accurate. You wound less deer. Let's just put rifles in archery season then. Why not? To heck with it. Let's just make it. And it's all about deer numbers anyway. It's just quotas, right? Let's just make it rifle season all year long. Smart. You'll wound less deer. You will. And if it's just about controlling deer numbers, rifles year round. It's the way to go. Yes. Now, if you guys get the bait done, like icing on the cake, it'd be like, hey man, we kick the crossbow lobby out. And we put it in their own season. Just like muzzleloaders have their own season. Just like guns have their own season. Crossbows can have their own season. It would be a great thing. And the next one, which this guy isn't going to like, but I firmly believe that there needs to be some sort of quota in place for the non-residents. It cannot be unlimited, over-the-counter, free-for-all. Anybody can come here. And here's the other thing that's happening. As these states with these crazed, stone-cold killer hunters, like the dudes in Michigan that are like, dude, I can get it done in Michigan because I know how to hunt in the hardest situation on earth. But these guys get to a point where, like, my state is so ruined, I'm going to go to Ohio. As these states get ruined, more guys are just going to come here. So understand, you guys have some really good things going on, and you have a huge bullseye on your back for guys that want to come here. They're like, dude, Ohio, the guys in Ohio are complaining about some issues. Rightfully so. But where I'm from, it's completely ruined. So they're going to keep coming here more. It's not stopping. It's not slowing. So if you think the amount of non-residents are bad now, wait 15 more years. It will all be locked up. I've seen it happen. You look at what happened to Illinois. It's astounding. So I just think there needs to be a quota, and I'm not advocating for, don't let any non-residents come here. I hate those non-residents. I moved from Michigan to Iowa, and all my buddies are like, "You're going to start ragging on non-residents now, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I probably will." And I'm not. And like I said, I go to Kansas. I'm a guest of that state. I'm a non-resident from Kansas. I go there. I'm like, get it, guys? I'm not from here. I appreciate you allowing me to come here. And if you guys tell me that the draw is getting a little bit longer, you're going to eliminate some of the tags. You guys are in charge. I respect your system, right? I'm not here to put my weight and say, no. You guys need to make exceptions for me. I need a tag every year. I'm a guest of that state. It should be you guys that decide how many non-residents come here. If it's, if there's a quota, it should be up to you, not me. And I'm a guest of Ohio. If I ever come here, I'm a guest, and I need to follow your rules. And you guys should be the ones to decide that, not me. And I'm saying that as a guest and a non-resident of Ohio.
Yeah, I would second that. I agree with everything that Skip said there, and in that order probably as well. I think it's important to point out, guys, that none of these issues, it's not like hey, fix this one thing and all of the issues of the state are going to be fixed. In many cases, one plays off the other, and you add 3 or 4 of them in the mix, you've got a compounding effect that's adding to a lot of the negatives that we see here. So if you start with a corn pile and you work down the list there, the third or fourth that I'll interject, to what Skip said, is cell cameras specifically. You could say trail cameras, but specifically cell cameras. And I would point to Iowa and say, well, Iowa has cell cameras, right? And so maybe they can be used and still be, in a very positive situation. But I do think that specific technology combined with things like corn piles, like we have here in Ohio, combined with, crossbows in the archer season, and combined with the non-resident stuff as well, all of that compounding effect has us in a situation where it couldn't be any easier, frankly. And we've got 4 months for non-residents, for anybody who's willing to stack those 4 things in their favor to go out and be highly effective at killing whatever buck that they so choose. And so I think that'd be the 4th one that I throw in the mixer. But I wholeheartedly agree with the order with corn piles way at the top.
Yeah, and thank goodness, Iowa. Yeah, we have cell cams, but of those 3 things that he just mentioned, Iowa takes 2 of them right off the table. There's no corn piles and there's no crossbows. So, and I look at the negatives of corn piles and you can say, here's all the list of the negatives. And I can't do that with cell cams. Is there some negative? Sure. But is it like poisoning wildlife? Is it, degrading the habitat, whatever, all that long list? No, it's not. Does it have some downs? It absolutely does. But thank goodness we don't have that triple combo in Iowa, and I'm thankful for that. Here's a question. Oh man, this one could get me in trouble too. 4.5-year-old 175-inch or a 7.5-year-old 90-inch 7-pointer. And then there's a second question. Is the public misconception of CWD going to be the end of deer hunting? Okay. So to the first question, I am only going to answer this for myself. And remember, this is coming from the kid that would shoot any deer I saw. And I saw, I'll give you an example. When I actually knew what I was doing by 16, because I started at 14 when I got that buck. By 16, I actually knew what I was doing. I knew how to hang a tree stand, not be an idiot, actually get deer within range. I would see 4, maybe 5 bucks in a whole season, okay? So the first buck I saw, I definitely shot it. And when I say 4 and 5 bucks in a whole season, that means 1 came within range. 1. So yeah. This is coming from the guy that shot 1.5-year-old bucks. And then I'm like, I got me a few of them 1.5-year-olds. I'm going to try them for a 2-year-old now. And I just graduated up. So where I'm at now, I've shot good deer. I will never shoot a 4.5-year-old 175-inch deer. I just won't do it. Now, am I telling some kid, don't shoot a 4.5-year-old 175-inch deer? No. If somebody says, dude, it's my 5th year hunting, I shot a 130 before. Shoot it. You've never shot a deer like that? Go for it. Fantastic. Now, if somebody said black and white, night and day, just cut and dry, biologically speaking, what is more responsible to shoot? A 4.5-year-old 175-inch deer or a 7.5-year-old 90-inch 7-pointer? The 7.5-year-old 90-inch 7-pointer every single time, no questions asked. What's the difference? One, I can't brag to my buddies and be like, this deer scores 175 inches because he only scores 90 inches as a 7-pointer. So to me, part of this is just ego. If those 2 deer are sitting in front of me and I say 7.5 years old and he's 90 inches and I know he's 7.5 and I know that deer's 3 years younger and he's going to be bigger next year and he's got a rare, really good genetic makeup to him, it would be irresponsible for me to shoot that younger deer. And it's just our outlook, though. But my outlook would be, a biological outlook, which isn't probably popular among a lot of hunters. It's a biological outlook, though. I'd say, you know what? I shot a 7.5-year-old deer. I would strongly argue that 7.5-year-old deer was a harder deer to hunt and get than that 175-inch 4-year-old. It's a smarter animal. It survived longer. It's got that 6th sense. It's a more difficult animal to get. So, but for me, and it's just me, I'd say, look I got a 7.5, if it was at all about bragging, or, you're showing your buddies, look, I got a 7.5-year-old deer. That's cool. And I don't care where you're at. A 7.5-year-old deer is rare. To me, that's cool, though. That's the trophy in itself, if you want to call it a trophy, or an accomplishment, or wow, I got it done. So I would proudly shoot that 7.5-year-old deer and say, this is a trophy in some ways. I'd be proud of that deer. And I'd say, yeah, it scores 85 inches less than your 4-year-old, but I'd be stoked.
Yeah. Well, and so here would be so I'm in that situation, right in this very moment. I've got a 175-inch 4-year-old, and I've got they're not 80, they're a little better than 80 inches, but they're 7-year-old, 120, 130 type deer. I think that and I'll give myself this advice, kind of where I'm at with it right now, is you need to understand the nature of probably the property that you're hunting, of the guys that are hunting the property. If it's not just you, what is the group dynamic? And when I say the dynamic of the property, I also mean, what is the neighbor situation? So in my specific scenario, I've passed enough 4-year-olds like that for 6, 7, 8 years in a row, and I've got a 0% track record. Every single one of them has been killed. And so I think, as of this very moment where I'm at with that deer, is as much as I have tossed with it, I don't want to shoot a 175-inch 4-year-old necessarily, because I really cherish what the animal can be. I know what that animal can look like at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. That's a 200-inch deer all day. And I'd love as much as anybody to do that, but I also am not an idiot. And I'm going to learn from the experience on that property too. And so I know where that deer's at on the property, and I know the likelihood of him getting killed. And so I think the decision that I've made at this point is I'm absolutely going to target that deer. And so I think that's the decision as of right now. If that 80-inch 7-year-old, comes in front of me, I don't think I'm passing him. Certainly not if that other deer is not in play. I guess that probably is the question. If they're both standing there in front of you, which one do you shoot? And that's a tough call. As of today, I'm probably shooting that 175-inch 4-year-old in that specific scenario. However, you put me on Skip's farm in Iowa, or any farm where I feel that the odds are more likely, and you lean into that bet on the deer methodology, which I'm fully in favor of. Then yeah, I would love nothing more than to pass that 175-inch 4-year-old. That'd be best case scenario. And from a management standpoint, yeah. If in best case scenario, you got 2 tags, and you can whack that. You can whack them both. You want to hit part 2 here? Is the public misconception of CWD going to be the end of deer hunting? I'll give a short one there, and you can tail on this. I don't know, honestly. It seems like every state's got an entirely different way of thinking about it and definitely dealing with it. There are some states that have gone super aggressive. They've hired, they're hiring guys, through government contracts to shoot deer off corn piles. Any and every deer. They're trying to really just limit deer numbers. Just get it down to a point where it's kind of a COVID mentality. It's like we need to just get these deer as isolated from one another as possible so this disease can't spread. But it honestly doesn't seem like anybody's seen any success from that whatsoever, as far as I can tell from the studies. They've just killed a bunch of deer and ticked off a bunch of landowners and reduced hunter opportunity, and really there have been no results publicized, from it that I'm aware of, anyways. And so I would say that my nature is to, contrary to, I guess, to my last sentiment there, is to bet on the animals. I think biologically they're going to be inclined to overcome a disease like that. I think that they are seeing strains. There's studies in Oklahoma and Texas. There is some inherent genetic resistance to things like that. And so I would be inclined to let nature run its course and see where we go.
So I'll give 2 quick responses to that one. One is the public perception of CWD. I really think that the direction of the public perception of CWD has drastically changed since this little thing called COVID happened. And I think people went, okay, I need to get my 14th booster shot because the government said I should. I need to wear a mask. I need to social distance. I can't leave my house. And, you guys were wrong about all this. You were wrong about all this. And I think that woke a lot of people up. And I think the public went, wait a minute, if you got it wrong about that, do you maybe have it wrong about this? And the government diagnosed it, and they look and they say, okay, let's look at some examples of how the government's handled that. Wisconsin would be case in point, hundreds of millions of dollars spent, probably substantially more when you look at what the revenues to the deer hunting economy, property values, and so on, the impacts that took, and you go, so how'd that work out for Wisconsin? Complete train wreck. It was a complete waste of money. it was $100 million, $200 million, 10, whatever. They'll use lower figures because they're saying, well, we only spent this much to treat the CWD and to actually implement these programs. But in reality, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Absolutely for nothing. Now, there's some naysayers in Wisconsin that say, but well, we gave up though. You know, we threw in the towel too early. Now, you know, so I think the public is extremely skeptical of CWD. And the other thing that's woken the public up to being extremely skeptical of CWD is they're going, listen, guys, I've heard the CWD stuff for 20 years, and I keep going out every 3, 4, 5 years, and I'm seeing deer herds getting wiped out from EHD, completely decimated. And you guys are almost dismissive of it. And when we had a DNR, head of our DNR that was dismissive of EHD, he would say, well, we only had 500 documented cases of EHD. It's a big nothing. And those are almost his words verbatim. It's a big nothing. It's just a minor blip. Well, and then they started doing a little bit of data and a little bit of research into how many people actually report this, how many cases get discovered, and of those discovered, how many get reported. And it basically, whatever that number is, you can multiply it by no less than 10. So last year we had something like 3,000 reported cases of EHD. And now we actually have data and research that shows the best you can do is get a 10% reporting, because guys aren't walking through their timber and through swamps and through their cattails when there's mosquitoes out and it's miserable out when it's 85 degrees looking for dead deer. People aren't doing that. And if they do find a dead deer, how many people report it? Very few. So they know that at least 90% of the cases aren't getting reported. So people are watching saying, hey, I know you've been talking about the CWD stuff, but there's no deer anymore. Like Western Iowa, it's devastated. Like 100% lost pockets in certain sections, you know, and certain regions where you're like, we had 90% loss, and then you go across the whole region and average it out, and you're like, they lost 2/3 of their deer. Like, guys are saying, can we just close hunting season? So you've got this huge epidemic of EHD that I think has really swayed the focus. And here's the dirty little secret that's great, is I get to talk to DNR folks from different states, legislators who have influence on these issues from different states. And when they talk frankly about it, one, they don't really have the answer. Two, they're skeptical of their own data. They don't actually believe it half the time. And listen, I have to say these things. It's my job, and I can't really say anything deviating from that because that could jeopardize my job. And that's a real big problem. And here's the question I have posed to no less than half a dozen leaders of different states that are involved in CWD. Okay, CWD is going to kill a bunch of deer, right? Yep, okay. So we're going to kill a bunch of deer to slow a disease that's going to kill all the deer. Yep, okay, got it. The prion, this stays in the soil forever, correct? Yep. It can be transmitted if I go bale my alfalfa, move my alfalfa. If a deer carcass is laying there dead and a crow eats it or a coyote eats it and travels 3 miles away and deposit that over there, the prions are going to be over there, correct? So it's going to naturally spread no matter what I do. That's correct. And I can't destroy this prion. There's nothing I can do to treat the prion. That's correct. Okay. So if we take every deer off the landscape for 100 years, and I've asked every single biologist or leader on this issue in no less than 6 different states, if we take every deer off the landscape, period, for 100 years, if we do not get a cure for this, and we repopulate that 100 years later, the prion will still be there, and they're just going to get reinfected. That would be right. So what are we doing for a cure? There's some research being done. Okay, how much are we spending on testing? Well, we get federal dollars. Certain states take tens of millions in federal dollars. Iowa, maybe I better not say the amount if it's at all sensitive information, but we don't. States have options to take less or more. Certain states take a lot, and you're going to have a lot of testing. And you say, okay, you guys took all this federal dollars from some stimulus that Biden put through back in the day. and you're getting $20 million. They want to keep testing. They want that money coming. It funds jobs, funds the testing. Wait. See, you're getting $20 million in federal dollars to test for CWD. Yep. And what are you spending on researching for that cure again? Well, nothing. But without a cure, this is all for nothing. Well, that would be right, but we want that money to keep coming. It makes no sense. Without a cure, just run it to its natural end. This is all I'd say. I'm not going to definitively answer this, but I can't get a government agency, I can't get the head of a government agency to give me any different answer. Without a cure, what is this all for? How does this end? If we don't have a cure, if that prion stays in the soil forever, it's either we have a cure, deer can live to older age with it, which heck, well, you know, some of these deer can live to 6 or 7. Well, guess what? In a lot of states, they don't live to 6 or 7, and it isn't because of CWD. It's because of arrows and bullets. So if we don't have a cure, this is all for nothing. And I have yet to have one go, well, okay, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, just run it to its logical end. Okay. Ideal buck to doe ratio, I would just say, if people are shooting a responsible amount of does, you know, and this is a loaded question, you know, I go out and I see 30 does and I see 2 bucks consistently, you got a problem. And that problem is not because, you know, the fawns that are getting spit out are just female deer. It's called dudes are just shooting bucks and they're passing up all the does, and they don't want to shoot the does, and they don't want to shoot the does because it's going to mess up their buck hunts, or, you know, they're literally just out to shoot a buck and don't want to jeopardize that. So I would just say in situations like that, you know, everybody is shooting all the bucks and nobody's shooting the does, and the browse is getting absolutely destroyed. And, you know, there's just a whole lot of crop damage, a whole lot of problems. It's not really a ratio answer. It's just a general population. And, you know, the deer hunter in me would be like, you know, we can actually sustain a lot more deer than what people would think. And the deer hunter in me would say, let's just not try and wipe out all the bucks and fix it that way, instead of shooting just so many does. So we just, you know, if we want the ratio right, like, hey, there's this big block, there's 100 does out there, and there's 2 bucks left because everybody shot them. Everybody with 2 acres with a corn pile shot a buck. So there's 2 bucks left and there's 100 does. So let's shoot 85 does so we get the ratio a little better. To me, that's not a good solution. It'd be like, no, let's not wipe out all the bucks. Let's get it so there's actually a reasonable amount of bucks out there. So, you know, ratio, but loosely speaking, you know, 3-4 to 1 is fine by me. In all honesty, some guys would say 2 to 1. And I will tell you a really quick story. So two bucks, or 2 does to 1 buck. Sorry. And, you know, I've heard that one at a younger age. 2 to 1 is what you want. You know, down in Texas, if you rattle, every buck comes in because it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. And there was one time on my farm where my farm's a nice sized farm, and there was a lot of deer, and we shot 150 does off of there that year, and there's a lot of deer, and I thought I was doing a great thing. I mean, I'm being responsible here, and I was getting a little bit of crop damage, and it was at the peak of our deer population in the state of Iowa. And I make mistakes just like everybody else, and the next year, oh my gosh, those bucks absolutely annihilated each other. I had never in my life found a set of locked up bucks, ever. I found 3 sets of locked up bucks. Every buck I would watch would come out with like an eyeball poked out. Every tine cracked off. I mean, it killed literally a dozen bucks plus, because I'm like, they went to war fighting over the does. We overdid it. So, you know, I used, back in the day, just cliche magazine articles, this guy, this thought leader, 2 to 1. I would never do that ever again. Ever. You know, 3 or 4 to 1. And even if people think it's 3 or 4 to 1 or 5 to 1, they're probably seeing more does and and some of those bucks are a little bit wiser. And the other thing is a lot of times people just mentally aren't going, oh yeah, that's right, you know, that's a button buck, that's a button buck, that's a button buck. So the ratios are a lot better than what people think. And the only time I see the real problem is you know, those situations where it's like, dude, there's a million deer out there and every buck just got plucked off and now it's just a pile of does left. It's the only time I see a real problem.
Yep, I would second that for sure. I've seen exactly that as well. I think just to pivot and look at a different part of it is more so the overall number of deer. You know, so if you're shooting for a ratio, you know, I think, you know, 1 buck to 2 or 3 or 4 does or whatever it is perfectly healthy. I think it's more so about, and around here what we deal with is an overpopulation of deer, at least. Well, maybe not. Kevin was telling me in this specific area, maybe you guys don't have as many, but I'm just an hour and a half east of us here, and we've got a pile of deer. There's a lot of them for the amount of habitat that we have. And it's a big challenge for us, just accessing stands and, you know, especially on food sources and stuff. It's just that they can be really challenging to hunt. So really from an enjoyment of the hunt standpoint and an accessibility to some of those, you definitely want to try to keep your deer numbers in check. And then also as it relates to herd health, you know, I think the studies have shown, and definitely, you know, more recently with thermal drone surveys and stuff like that, the areas with lower deer numbers consistently crank out, you know, higher, you know, bigger scoring bucks, you know, and healthier deer in period. So if you have, you know, more habitat for fewer deer, I think they're going to be more huntable and they're going to be, you know, better off, you know, from a health standpoint, periods. That's what I would shoot for.
Yeah. Smaller landowners. Okay. So I deal with these hundreds, maybe thousands, living right by Des Moines. It's very much like around here. I mean, it's all 5s, 10s, 20s, 40 acres. I grew up on 5 acres, 7 acres, 10 acres, 40 acres, 20 acres. I'm around this all the time. It's extremely common in Illinois. It's extremely common in Indiana. It's extremely common in Iowa, especially by the big cities. No, Iowa doesn't have any people. It's all multi-thousand acre land. No, it's not. It's not even close. We have very, very similar dynamics. And actually the land parcel size in Iowa compared to Ohio, it's actually very similar. You know, you get by any of our populated areas and it's very sectioned up, very small pieces of land. And, you know, for 15 years of my life, I hunted these small parcels. And I was very successful. I had to learn the basics of deer trails, deer signs. There's an opening, there's a structural change, there's rubs, there's scrapes. I couldn't do food plots. You know, for 15 years, 0 food plots. I know I mentioned that earlier, but 0. And I did just fine. And the folks in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, hunting these small parcels, they get opportunities at bucks. And again, you have 4 months to do it. 4 months. Now, if the answer is, but I'm only going to hunt that 4-acre parcel, and I'm not going to put any effort into just knocking on some doors, going to public land, trying to find another place to hunt. No, I have to shoot a buck off my 4-acre parcel. And the guy next to you says, I have to shoot a buck off my 3-acre parcel. And the guy next to him says, I have to shoot a buck off my 7-acre parcel. And the only way to do that is with corn piles. If you successfully do that, you will destroy the neighborhoods. You will absolutely degrade the neighborhoods. The deer hunting will be ruined. You'll be left with an abundance of does, a bunch of landowners around there that are pissed off about high deer numbers, car deer accidents because you're not shooting the does. And there's no bucks left, though. It ruins neighborhoods if that's your mindset. And my point is, you can hunt small parcels without a corn pile. This perception of, I can't shoot a buck without a corn pile is insanity in my mind. I've done it for 30 years. It is very doable. I've shot deer off of 2 acres, off of 5 acres, off of 20 acres. I'm with countless buddies that do this year in, year out. To say it is not doable, or, you know, even without anything, but they're still thinking, hey man, I put a little, you know, I put a little water hole in. How much does that cost you? Well, borrowed mom and dad's shovel, and I got a kiddie pool. I put a little water in there, about $5. Okay, there's things you could do. Is that critical to do it? No, I could do it without that, but you could do that. You know, you could say, hey, I opened up this little area, and I spread some clover seed. and it wouldn't have all the detriments of the bait, you know. And I'm saying you can still do it without that. 4 months a season with crossbows, compounds, muzzleloaders, and guns, you can still get it done on a buck. Now the reality is some of those people aren't going to shoot deer off of, you look at it and like, whoa, every one of those guys picked off a buck, 75, 80, 90% of them, and almost all of them were young bucks. Oh, there really is hardly any bucks left. It's completely ruined. The reality is those same people will still probably shoot some bucks. It's just that not everybody will get a buck. And some people go, you know what? I had to go over to some public land over there. I had to get permission on a few more places. Maybe it's not sustainable that every one of us shoots a buck every single year, because it ends in a train wreck with that mindset. So absolutely doable without bait piles. For some odd reason, people in multiple states do it routinely year after year after year in that very, very short 4-month period they have to chase those animals. Can be done. This question is, what are your thoughts on doing things to fight EHD on your property? And I have lots of thoughts on that. I do things that probably people aren't going to do, but I'm still going to mention them. I will give feeds, mineral, stuff like that has garlic, sulfur, and then there's different, like I'll continue to mention cobalt or B vitamins. And there's two things that those elements do, or those substances do. One, it repels the midge, so they don't bite. Two, they're anti-inflammatory, so it helps with circulation. So when a deer gets bit, they can deal with that virus so much more. It helps with circulation. It helps cool that animal down. And you say, well, what's the data on that? There's tons of data on it. There's tons of data, and it's mainly in sheep, horses, goats, but it's extremely effective. Now, the one that would be somewhat controversial, but it's not controversial because this is completely legal, would be, where does the EHD come from? Where does blue tongue come from? And we get both in Iowa. We get, there's 5 different strains. I think two of the serotypes are EHD and 3 are blue tongue, or vice versa, something like that. But they're starting with cattle, and this is a new virus to these deer, okay? It's not like 100 years ago these deer were getting EHD. No, the first discovered introduction of EHD in white-tailed deer was in the 1950s. That's the first time we've ever seen it. So this is a foreign virus from overseas imported through cattle. Cattle harbor the virus, fine. My family has cattle, and, they feel no guilt about this, nor should they, nor do they care. But that's where it starts. So the midge bites the cattle and gets the virus and starts infecting the deer, and then more midges bite those deer, and it just spreads like wildfire. Well, clearly cattle can get a vaccination, which is not practical whatsoever for deer at all. What is practical, though, and it's not the silver bullet for cattle, but like cattle people don't want to get blue tongue. Blue tongue's going to be a bigger problem than EHD, and they don't want that. So what my neighbors do is they'll give ivermectin to their cattle 2 to 4 times a year. And a lot of my neighbors will say, listen, man, I have these really high dollar cattle, and we sell semen straws for $2,000 or whatever they say. This cow's worth $400,000. Yeah, I'm giving them ivermectin. I'm not losing these, and I vaccinate, and I do all these other things. Well, there's differing studies on, ivermectin's impact on midge population. So a midge bites it. There's a lot of studies that show the midge dies. There's some studies that says it's minimal impact or it doesn't have an impact. I strongly believe it does. It kills all biting insects, including internal parasites. So somebody's like, but it's not labeled for deer. You can't give it to deer. Correct. You can give it to the cattle, though. And if I could have a magic world where somebody big, so if my neighbors administered ivermectin to their cattle, would that help? Yes, I strongly believe it would. And somebody say, well, what would that cost? Either a 3-liter or a 5-liter jug of ivermectin, I think, is $80. And that would take care of my whole neighborhood. So my neighbors do that, and if they didn't do it, I would just give them some ivermectin. And for 20 years now, we've had probably 5 significant EHD outbreaks where guys are like, dude, I got wiped out. And I'm talking 5 miles from me, 10 miles from me, 50 miles from me, 3 miles from me. I got wiped out again. I got wiped out again. In 20 years, I've never got wiped out. I might lose one on the very edge of my property, one in some random spot, but all my neighbors still to this day, they're like, I just lost $25. How many did you lose? I'm like, none. Well, all my neighbors are giving ivermectin to their cattle. Those guys aren't. The deer get different supplements with different vitamins, healthy, and also just the general health of the deer. You know, they're healthy deer. Like I said, the body weights on these deer, they're robust. They can definitely handle an illness and an impact like a virus far better if they were some shriveled up, a really unhealthy animal to begin with. So in 20 years, I've not had EHD ravage my farms where everybody in every radius 5 and 10 miles from my farms has been annihilated over and over and over and over, and I have avoided it thus far. Maybe coincidence, but I haven't spent a whole lot of money doing it either. And the last thing I'd add to that is good timing on this is clean water. I had one pond that I would find. It was on the very edge of my farm, and it was by one neighbor that sometimes had some cattle, and he did not use ivermectin. And that's the one place I ever found EHD deer, and it was always in one pond. Now, trying to put all this together, I can't make a scientific case for this, but this was the one pond I would find EHD deer in, and it was this green water, and it was a nasty sludge. So this year I spent 3 hours with my excavator, and I just dug that bank, or I dug that dam way below the water level, and I let that sucker drain out. There's no water in it. With no water, there is no midge. That problem is solved. And I got rid of that nasty, nasty water. Now, in general, cleaner water, water with high oxygen levels will have a far less midge population. Does something like EHD fence work? Yes. Cleaner water, in any sense of the words, reduce muck, stagnant water, bringing that water back to life, getting more oxygen in that water absolutely helps. Dissolving that stagnant organic matter that the midges feed on absolutely does make a benefit. Now, is that the only way to do it? I mean, I'll go in, and my pond that so I drained this pond. Here's the ironic part. I drained this pond, and right when the water, I could see the water, and I could see maybe some tadpoles, but most everything no fish, nothing. All say I started looking out there, and I'm like, deer skull, deer skull, deer skull, deer skull, deer skull, deer skull. I mean, it was a graveyard, preserved. I'm like, where's the woolly mammoth? We're going to find him. I mean, there was dead animals preserved for just countless amounts of dead deer in there. No doubt in my mind from EHD. There's zero doubt. And it was unbelievable how many deer had gone into that water and just got buried in that stagnant water that looked like they died last year. But, some of those deer could have been 10 years old. They were perfectly preserved because there's no oxygen in that water. So what I'll do is I'll spend one day with a D6, maybe 2 D6s, and we'll speed it up, get all that muck out of there, put it to the side, and it's actually topsoil. You can do things with this topsoil. Fix the drainage back into my pond so it doesn't refill with all that silt and all that nasty organic matter, and just repeat the problem over time. And I will carve that out into super deep clay banks, and that pond will not be a problem, treatment or not, as long as I control the runoff and I make it deep without all that muck and organic matter. 90% of my problem is solved there. Now, do things like EHD fence work? Yes. I strongly believe they do. Cleaner water will definitely result in less midges. Now, it's not going to completely alleviate the problem because you might have less midges here, but if midges are not good flyers, if you have a slight breeze, you can have a 5-mile-an-hour wind and a midge could be, move in from a mile with just a light breeze. So it's not there. I don't think there's any magic solution. The real magic solution that is going to happen, that is a real long-term solution, is a deer building the immunity and the antibodies to the virus. And in cases, the smartest thing a guy could do when EHD hits a region is those surviving deer, probably a large percentage of those were either survivors of the EHD or they already had resistance. So post EHD outbreak, the smartest thing people people could do is not shoot those surviving deer, because those are going to pass on the immunity and the antibodies. And when I go to South Kansas, which used to get ravaged by EHD, I mean ravaged, you go talk to them now, it's been decades. They don't get it at all. I mean, I'm not saying at all, but nothing like we do. And it's like, but you guys used to get hammered. Well, they built resistance and antibodies to it. So the real solution long term is resistance and antibodies. And, you know, Ohio's outbreak to EHD, Iowa got it before Ohio did, these massive outbreaks. So you guys are probably a little bit behind on the bell curve, where you're probably going to have a few more outbreaks. But I would strongly argue, based on evidence, based on talking to folks at the DNR who really understand this, that in Iowa we're most likely past that bell curve of these bad outbreaks, and we're on the downward swing where antibodies and resistance are being built. Now, the one big unknown is, sure, could a new serotype come up and, you know, and start it over? Sure. But, you know, the main viruses and what we're seeing, we're probably building the immunity and the antibodies that we want, and not shooting those deer that have built up that resistance, in my mind, would be about the smartest tactic anybody could take.
I was going to ask you a follow-up question, Skip. Do you use any pesticides to combat that? I've heard of, like, is it a neem oil or anything like that? Neem oil?
So this guy on the Hunter podcast was talking about neem oil. Don't listen to those guys. Total dopes. Total dopes. No, I'm kidding. I had actually never heard about neem oil, so I can't really... I've used neem oil on my orchards to just smother insects, and it suffocates the insects. It's just an oil that covers them. So I've used it on my apples, my pears, all my orchards as an organic treatment. So I think there's some merit to that. The problem with the hatching of the midges is there's such a rapid cycle of it. So you could say, you know, I ran a fogger, I ran permethrin, or I ran bifenthrin, which stays in the system far longer. And you might get that cycle of midges, but there's going to be a new cycle next week and next week and next week and next week. You could never practically keep up on it. So insecticidal treatments, while it does kill the midge, and like I've seen literally planes go fog permethrin, which just kills everything. Like, I hate the midge. I hate them with a passion. I wish I could squish every one of them. But fogging it, kind of like, you know, Vietnam with Agent Orange, where you're like, let's wipe it all out. That's what you're doing. I mean, you're killing everything. And it's also got problems with aquatic life. There's a lot of downsides with any of the parathrins, like bifenthrin or permethrin, which I won't go down this because I will put people to sleep on that one. So I just would avoid that. Cleaner water is by far the best thing in my mind. Neem oil would be like, I need to do more research into that, and probably some merit to it. It's just the midge life cycle is so rapid and so continuous that it's so hard to keep up on them. We're getting to the end. We're moving here. How much an advantage does a guy have if he plants a food plot and puts a feeder filled with corn in it versus a neighbor that only has food plots? I'd say, I mean, in my neighborhood in Iowa, if we hear of a guy that is putting out a corn pile, and it happens, they're usually doing some pretty substantial damage. Now, the beauty in Iowa is we usually find out about it, different ways of doing that, and we turn them in and they get busted. But they definitely, they shoot a lot of deer off of them. So it's very deadly, very deadly. If I could use corn piles, if my game was, dude, I want to shoot these bucks to brag about them, and I'll do any means necessary, maybe aside from shooting thermals, using thermals at night to get them. You give me corn piles in Iowa, you'd be extremely deadly. I mean, it would cause some real problems. So yeah, I'd say the corn piles on top of a food plot is a huge advantage, in my opinion.
Kevin's telling me we've got 10 minutes here, so we'll wrap it up here with some of these. But I would say I'm a perfect case in point. We planted, I think this past year we planted 20 acres of food plots on our Ohio farm. And over time, we've learned to supplement with corn piles and stuff like that too. But we've just seen time and time again, it's like it don't matter how much food you plant in a food plot, or even if you're hunting in a food plot that you planted, if you dump a corn pile or some sort of an attractant, in bow range, you're not going to beat the attraction of it. So, I mean, it's going to win every time.
I'll knock these out really easy. Does Iowa regulate crossbows in Iowa, and was baiting ever legal in Iowa's deer season? We do regulate crossbows. We put them in their own season. So there's a muzzleloader season that's actually 3 weeks long, which is pretty generous compared to any other state. So if you want to use a crossbow, great, fantastic, good for you. You can use them 3 weeks at the end of the season with the muzzleloaders. We didn't stuff them in archery season where they don't belong, in my opinion, and actually based on a whole lot of evidence. They don't belong there. So if you want to use the crossbows, you're welcome to do it. You have 3 weeks to do it with the muzzleloaders. And the folks who are injured, senior citizens, disabled, great, fantastic. Use those during archery season, and I don't fault you a bit. And I don't know of a single hunter who has a problem with that I even know of. Was baiting ever legal in Iowa deer season? Never was, never will be. What is Ohio going to look like in 10 years if we don't do something about the hunting from non-resident hunters? You guys are going to be just more and more locked up by non-residents. I mean, I look across the border into Missouri, which is the exact same terrain. It looks the same. The genetics are the same. The composition is the same. It is all leased up, lock solid. And you go, wait. But Missouri doesn't have a good reputation as Iowa. Is the hunting not nearly as good when you cross that border, which is right by my house, into Missouri? No, it goes down the tubes. It's not even close to the quality of Iowa. And you go, what's the lease prices in Iowa? Well, the very little leasing that goes on, $10, $15 an acre. You cross that line into Missouri, everything's leased up. You say, well, what's the price of a lease in Missouri? $50? Well, wait. But the hunting's not as good in Missouri. Yeah, but they offer over-the-counter unlimited tax to non-residents. So it all gets tied up. And you go knock on doors in northern Missouri where it isn't as good. It is infinitely harder to get permission to cross that line in Missouri. It's all locked up. It's all outfitted. The residents have nowhere to go. Go into Illinois and say, hey, resident of Illinois with no money, hey, kid that's 15 to 25 years old, go down the road and knock on the door and get permission on a farm. Won't happen. That game was gone a decade ago. I know buddies that are paying $80 to $100 an acre to lease stuff in Illinois. That's where you guys are headed in 10 years if something doesn't change. It'll be locked up like that at obscene prices. But Jared probably has more experience with this and more experience in Illinois and Ohio than I do.
Well, I would agree. I would just say that the continued allowance of the combination of baiting and these technologies and stuff it's creating competition between ourselves, between hunters. We're all competing against our neighbor to shoot that buck that we're after. Everybody's got pictures of them. Everybody's going to try to dump the biggest corn pile or lease up the ground around it or run as many cell cameras as they can. And the more that competition is allowed to flourish, I just think that ultimately that's what's creating hunting is a rich man's sport, essentially. It's like who with the biggest corn pile or the most cell cameras wins at the end of the day, and we're on the fast track, at this point.
How valuable are drones? What are the drawbacks? I put two big distinctions in there. There's the general, like, hey, I want data on deer. I want to understand my ratios. I want to understand my age class. I personally don't have a problem with that. Then I'm going to put them in three categories. The second one is I use them for scouting. I know where a deer is because I just flew a drone over. That's going to be a real problem. It's a big problem. It's very much illegal in the state of Iowa. I don't know about Ohio. But using them for finding deer, for scouting, saying, ooh, found them, I'm going there tomorrow morning, I think is a real problem. And I'm strongly against it. Now, the one in Iowa that probably gets the most debate, rightfully so, is using deer for the recovery. And in that case, how we handle it as the state of Iowa, as the hunting groups and the conservation groups, is we say, you know what? We're going to defer this issue to law enforcement, and we're going to let them have the most input. And we're going to let them come up with a plan. Is there something, and here's our question to the COs of the state of Iowa and law enforcement, is there a system we can put in place that minimizes the abuses, that puts strict language as to how they're to be used? Maybe you register each flight. Maybe you put clear language that when you fly a drone over to recover deer, you can't hunt there for 48 hours, whatever. Is there language that can minimize the abuse? And my next question to the conservation officers where I want their expertise because it's far superior than mine, is if we can get to a system where, 5,000 deer are recovered that otherwise wouldn't have been because of drones, and there's, we've reduced the abuses. So, there's 50 abuses of it, right? So 50 abuses, but 5,000 legitimate recoveries. To me, that's a net winner. If the DNR or the CEOs were to say to me, okay, you guys are recovering 5,000 deer, but there's 4,000 abuses or 5,000 abuses, I'd say it's not worth it then. It's not. So it'd have to be so skewed that, the net benefit far outweighs the abuses. And there's going to be abuses to anything, right? You could say you can't use thermals to go hunt deer. Guys still going to do it? Of course they are. Are they going to use drones nefariously? Of course they are. Any technology can be. But I just want to know that, the merits of using drones to recover deer is far outweighing the abuses. And if I can use technology to recover a fatal deer that otherwise wouldn't be recovered, and I can get somebody to tag out instead of shooting another buck, there's some real validity there, So still a work in progress in the state of Iowa.
I think it's kind of like any technology where it's super cool, they're a lot of fun, and they can give us a lot of good, useful information, but they definitely have, like Skip said, the ability to be abused. I mean, for sure, an example of that is guys, throwing drones up and using them to scout deer, thermal drones. Whether it's in season or, it's so popular, at this point. It's like before guys will even buy a farm, it's like, hey, I'm interested in this farm. Let's throw a drone up real quick and see what's on it. Yep, 200-incher on her. We'll take it. So from an abuse standpoint, it definitely can be used to further that, kind of trajectory that I said that we're on. However, on the other side, mainly from a surveying standpoint, I think they're an extremely useful tool. I think that, frankly, a lot of states are overlooking or haven't quite figured out how to extrapolate the information that we can get from them to understand herd numbers. I think a lot of states are way off, don't have any idea how many deer they have. And it's because they're using old models, trail camera surveys, they're doing drive-by counts and stuff like that. I just don't think we have accurate numbers in a lot of states. So I would be a huge advocate of thermal drones for something like that.
This will be a pretty quick, easy one for me. We got 2 left and we're done. Unless somebody has something else they want to chime in on, throw something at me, yell at me. Kind of be fun, actually. Where does Ohio rank in B&C entries, and where is Iowa? Where does Ohio rank now compared to 15 years ago in B&C entries? I'm not sure about Ohio rankings. I'm going to suspect that they're down in B&C entries. And somebody's like, oh, so you trophy hunters. That just means there's less older bucks. I mean, really, and that's not something to be proud of. I mean, to have more older bucks, I think, for any state there's really no downsides in my mind. Hey, you have older bucks, and what's the problem with that? Point to me one downside of saying you have some older bucks in the herd. There's a balanced age structure. Find one negative with that. Well, and somebody come up with some stupid stretch, but really, go for it. What's the negatives of having somewhat of a balanced age structure? Because on the flip side of that, having a skewed age structure where all the young bucks get killed and there's a bunch of does, I can come up with a whole lot of negatives for there. So having a balanced age structure has a whole lot of benefits, and I really have to struggle to come up with any negatives there. Especially when you have a better age structure across the whole landscape where everybody benefits, the kids, the average day man. There's just more, everybody benefits from that. Not just the rich guy that's like, no, I have old deer because I own a huge chunk of land and I have tons of money. Those guys will always be fine. So let's have it across the whole landscape so everybody benefits from that. I would say Iowa probably, in reality, the reality is Iowa ranks number 1 for B&C bucks. What gets reported, I don't know. We might be, Iowa's only number 3. Yeah, everybody I know that shoots Boone and Crockett bucks, nobody reports them. In Iowa, we go, no, I'm not registering that buck. And I have no problem with people that do. But you say, well, you're close to Wisconsin. Yeah, those Wisconsin guys shoot so few of them that they're like, I shot one, I have to register it. Guys in Iowa shoot it. I don't know any of my friends that put their bucks in the record books. Like none. So in reality, we're probably 2nd, 3rd, 4th. In reality, we're probably number 1. It's probably Iowa and Kansas, But statistically speaking, what's actually recorded, I don't know. Wisconsin's number 1. Everybody should go there. Yep, I'll go with that.
I Googled it just for fun. So Ohio holds, it's number 5, I think, like overall, Boone and Crockett. And in 2020 to 2022, it's increased significantly. We're number 3, which I think is pretty perplexing. But
What's number 1 and number 2?
I don't know.
That's where
Probably Wisconsin and
That's where everybody should go.
Wisconsin and Kansas, I would guess. So, but I would suspect that it is in part of what we're talking about. There's way fewer people occupying much more of the land where some of these deer are living at. And so there's a very small number of people who are able to get deer to a certain age or score class that they're, targeting those deer. There's also, I don't know if we're not going to have time to go down this rabbit hole, but there's theories that Ohio at one time had a very high number of high fence operations that during the crash in 2008 and some other times there was a large number of high fence deer, frankly, does and fawns and all kinds of other that were let out, got out, storms that happened over the years. And so I would say way more than in a state like Iowa. We've had a high, I think there's genetic traces of some of those deer kind of across those states. You see deer like, I don't know to name any in particular, but like the C.J. Alexander buck was a freak of nature. A thing like that is like the chances of it coming from a high fence years and years prior, at least being from the genetic line, I would have to say is decent at least.
I would add to that, I love the people who brag about all the B and C bucks in Wisconsin. Well, yes, you're right. Everybody should go to Wisconsin. Oh, yeah, by the way, they have about 10 times, 7, 8 times the amount of habitat that Iowa does. I think they have 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I can't keep track of all the states, but, 3, 4, 5 times the amount of deer that Iowa has. And they're just out a little bit because everybody enters their buck when they shoot one because they're so rare. So, fine. Wisconsin, number 1. I congratulate them for that, and I encourage everybody to go to Wisconsin. And I will say, Iowa having 7% timber, having the least amount of deer of any Midwestern state, and the least amount of habitat. And somebody say, Kansas has slightly less timber than Iowa. Nebraska has slightly less timber than Iowa. Yeah, but you have all those prairie lands. You have these vast pastures. You have all these vast native grass stands that go for just tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres. You actually have far more habitat than Iowa does. So Iowa actually has the least amount of habitat and the least amount of deer of any Midwestern state, but I would argue that we probably produce the biggest deer. And per acre, per huntable population of deer, by far we have the best age class. There's no doubt in my mind, period. Now, the key to that, Ohio would be considerably better than Iowa. Considerably better. The bait gone, well, it's just about the big deer. No, that's a big benefit, though, to have some older age guys. You guys would be far better than Iowa. And I would be glad to come up here and go, holy cow, man, you guys are number 1, and Iowa is, we're behind Wisconsin now. I'm so ashamed of this, so embarrassed. I'd love to say that. Ohio could destroy Iowa. You guys could, mop the floor. You have so much more opportunity here to have better hunting than Iowa. Not even close. So baiting would get outlawed. Are we concerned about opposing groups coming up, opposing the new regulation on the state concerned about losing revenue with non-resident license, feed, et cetera? Do we need to have defense mechanisms or DM price? Yes. I think there needs to be a battle plan, if you will. I think there needs to be arguments thought out, because any issue, we want to defund this. We want to change this in government. There's always going to be opposition, and you need to understand what their arguments are. We deal with the same thing in Iowa. I know what the crossbow lobby is going to say. I know what the groups that want special outfittings are going to say. I know what their arguments are. You need to have minds that can understand and dissect these arguments and be ready for what you know is coming. I can already tell you what these groups are going to say. I can say, here, you're going to go to the Capitol and you're going to debate. Here's what they're going to say. I could list this out right now. And you just need to be prepared for that. It's not that complex, though. Not that hard. There will be opposition to anything. If you said, we want to guarantee that every kid gets a buck. That's just the new rule. And you get a trophy. Every kid gets a trophy that you're the greatest hunter on earth, and we're going to legislate that. There's going to be a debate about it. So whatever it is, there's going to be debates, passionate debates. There's going to be people who have tantrums. Whatever it is, there's going to be that issue. So just be ready for that. And the people who cower and oh, man, we got some nasty Facebook comments, and we had some guys that threw a tantrum, and they don't like it, and it's taken away from me. If you cave because of that, you can't do that. Good things are hard. Good changes, the right changes. You got to have some fighters involved. There's a fight there. I mean, it's a wise, healthy fight, but it's worth having. The whole revenue thing. By reducing bait, I can make a strong argument, and I could write this up for legislators, for the DNR, for your group, that could make a economic case that reducing bait will actually increase revenue for the state. It will increase the quality of the herd. It will retain more hunters. It will get kids more access. You look at Iowa's hunting economy, and they go, well, Iowa's deer hunting economy is $180 million a year. And then I start digging deeper with the DNR, and I said, now, I want to get some loose figures on what do we spend, though, on like small tractors because we want to do food plots, or even like harrows and four-wheelers. And all of a sudden, we start adding in those things. And not even like, this is a double-edged sword, but what it does to land values, increasing land values. And all of a sudden, like, well, we're probably at $300 or $400 million. So, the amount of small equipment sales, even from little no-till drills to sprayers to little tractors to four-wheelers to pickup trucks to an excited deer community that wants to spend money on all these things, even to the habitat improvements. The habitat companies in Iowa that are like, hey, I want to fix your timber. I want to have, do things to regenerate your timber stand improvement. I mean, the amount of money spent on that is it's staggering. So reducing bait, I'll just end it like this. Reducing bait, I can make almost a case closed argument and plan that I could present in the court of law to show the impacts of how it will actually increase the revenue to the state of Iowa and economically help the state of Ohio, and also improve, the hunting for everybody else. So the economics of removing bait, sure, there's a group that loses out on some money on bait sales, but then there's all these other groups that are going to benefit from the habitat improvements and from the equipment sales and, the oak regeneration and, the future of how our timber looks and just down the list. I'll make that economic argument any day of the week, rock solid. I believe it to my core.
Good. You nailed it.
Anything else? Let's make Ohio great. I love it.